I never thought I'd come home to an empty house. No smells of dinner, no warmth in the air, just a letter on the nightstand. And her engagement ring. 25 years of marriage shattered in one moment. She left me for another man. But what she doesn't know is the secret I kept. I'm not just her husband. I'm a millionaire. And now, as she struggles to start a new life, I'll be the one watching from the top. My revenge, silent, cruel, perfect. This is my story. The story of how love turned to ashes. There was a time not long ago when I loved coming home after a day at work. I would walk into a warm kitchen filled with delicious smells, and if the kids weren't out playing with the neighbors, I might see them somewhere in the house. I would find my wife busy with dinner preparations or setting the table. There was always a genuine kiss and a warm hug waiting for me. It felt like a classic American scene, like something you'd see in a painting. Getting to that point took a while. Our early years were tough at times. The kids were small and had big needs, but somehow we managed and never faced real hardship. We had what we needed, even if we had to wait for the nicer things. With hard work and patience, we started to build our dream. We got 2 cars, a bigger house, and other comforts when we could. Our parents had lived through tough times and taught us to be practical. Over the years, and as we grew older, that sense of responsibility paid off for our family. By our early 40s, Helen and I were enjoying a comfortable life. Our kids, Jason and Anne, had finished high school and were off at university, studying engineering and marketing. They had the same determination that Helen and I had when we were young. They knew what they wanted and how to achieve it. But when they left home, things started to change. Dinner often turned into quick meals or trips to the deli to grab food. The house still looked the same, but it felt empty without the kids. It was also missing my partner. We used to have regular date nights, but those faded away to once a month or less. Helen began volunteering at the community center with some friends from the neighborhood. I didn't see her much during the week after that. While they were her friends, I didn't feel a connection to them. It started to feel like we were living separate lives. Now, when I pulled into the driveway, I felt a sense of loss. I would glance at my driver's license and see Tom Davis, age 46, looking back at me. I didn't feel tired in the physical sense, as I kept fit and worked out regularly. Instead, I felt emotionally drained after 25 years of marriage that once seemed perfect. Our closeness had diminished too, becoming rare. That shift truly upset me more than anything else. I've always liked to try new things, and Helen was always open to it. But once the kids left home, everything changed. Now I feel tired and troubled, unsure of what to do. I unlocked the door and went inside. The place looked similar, yet different. There were no familiar cooking smells. I looked at the mantel and saw some pictures were missing, along with a small gold box where she kept her special keepsakes. As I went upstairs to the bedroom, I saw her closet was mostly empty, and her dresser had nothing inside. On her nightstand, I found a folded letter with her engagement ring resting on top of it. I had given her that ring 25 years ago. It had belonged to my grandmother, who got it from my grandfather many years before. Holding the ring brought back memories of the day I first put it on her finger. We were so young, filled with dreams for the future. I slipped it into my jacket pocket and opened the letter. Dear Tom, I didn't know how to say this face to face, so I'm writing you this letter. After a lot of thought, I've decided that I need to move forward with my life without you. I know this is difficult for both of us, but we've grown apart over the years, and I can't continue like this. Please believe me when I say this isn't your fault. I've developed feelings for someone else, and I can't keep hiding it. I know you will find out eventually, so I'm telling you now. The kids don't know yet, but I'll tell them. I know they will be upset with me for not being honest. I have felt bad for a long time and can't keep living this way. If it helps, I'm not taking much. I've taken half of our savings and some photo albums, but I will make copies for you. You can keep the house and everything else. I've taken what I wanted, and I won't be coming back. Tom, I know this will hurt you, just as it hurt me when I made this decision. The kids will find out where I am. It's only natural. If you ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I hope someday we can talk face to face. I can't look at you today because I feel so ashamed. I hope you will understand one day. Until we meet again, I will always care for you, Tom Davis. Helen. I felt all kinds of emotions, but honestly, I was just tired from it all. I sat there reflecting for about 15 minutes before I got up and walked to the kitchen. I opened the cupboard and took out a bottle of 20-year-old rum. I poured 2 shots into a glass and filled it with Coke. I repeated this 2 more times. I don't usually drink much. I mostly have rum and Coke with an occasional beer or wine. I didn't plan to drown my sadness in alcohol. Helen left me on a Friday, giving me the whole weekend to think about it. By Sunday evening, I had finished the half-gallon of rum and figured out my next steps. On Monday morning, before I could leave, a young woman came to my door and handed me some papers. Just as Helen had written, she left everything to me except her savings. She walked away from a fortune she didn't even know about. I thought she was foolish for giving it all up. The decline of our marriage had prepared me for feeling lonely. She thought I would miss her, but I only felt sad for 15 minutes that Friday evening. I called my office to say I'd be in later, then reached out to my brother, who is also my lawyer. He agreed to meet me for coffee to discuss the divorce. Tom, it's all above board. She is letting go of everything. I can hardly believe it, but I recommend that you sign it and let her go. Is there any chance you would get back together? I looked at him, surprised by the question. Come on, Carl. You read the letter. What do you think? I took my pen and signed where I needed to on 3 copies of the papers. Let's send these to her lawyer right away. That sounds good. If she finds out what you're really worth, she might change her mind. I agreed. Helen didn't realize what she was giving up. She might not want it now, but her new partner could make her reconsider if he ever learned about it. The truth was, her stable husband was the owner of a software company that was about to be sold for $40 million. We created robotic software for various equipment, and I started the business in our garage 20 years ago, something Helen didn't even know about. She thought I was just a software engineer who did a bit of coding on the side. When the kids went to school, I had planned to sell the company and our house and take Helen to start fresh somewhere like Hawaii or Europe. But those plans never happened. She became more and more distant until, eventually, everything fell apart. Carl called me later that afternoon to tell me that Helen's lawyer had filed the divorce papers with the court. There would be no change of heart, and in 90 days, I would be officially divorced. If you haven't gone through this, it's hard to explain how it feels. Just 3 days earlier, I had come home to an empty house. Now I was practically divorced unless Helen came back to say it was all just a mistake. Part of me hoped that would happen, but deep down, I didn't really believe it. My son was the first to call. Dad, is it true? Mom is leaving you for someone else? At least she was honest with him. Jason, it seems that way. I signed her divorce papers this morning, and in 90 days, it will all be over. Dad, I don't know what to say. She told both of us, Anne and I, that it was her decision to leave you, and she's maybe living with someone new. Honestly, I was so angry I wanted to yell at her. Well, son, I'm glad you didn't. She is still your mother. You'll need to decide what kind of relationship you want with her. I don't know where she is, and at this point, I'm not going to look for her. Like I said, I signed the papers. It seems she cares for him more than for me now. As for me, I'm going to move forward and live my life the way I need to. We talked a bit more, and I learned that she was still in the area, but it was a big enough place that we wouldn't have to run into each other. I had a similar talk with my daughter. She took it harder. She told me she was done with her mother and didn't want to have anything to do with her again. I felt a bit proud of that, but I reminded her, just like I did with Jason, that she is still her mother. Over the next 3 months, I often thought Helen might come back, but she never did. The strange thing was, I wasn't really angry, and I couldn't understand why. I even tried to imagine her with another man, but I still didn't feel much anger. I felt a little sad about it, but that feeling faded fast. Finally, on the day the divorce became final, Carl showed up in my office and handed me the official papers. After 25 years of marriage, 2 kids, and all the challenges we faced, I was now a single man with an ex-wife somewhere in the city. 95 days had passed since I walked into that empty house and learned what had happened. I picked up the phone to make a call I'd been waiting to make. Bill, are we ready to close yet? He quickly replied yes, and we set a meeting for the next morning. Bill was the CEO of Omega Software Solutions, and he had been interested in buying my company for nearly a year before Helen left. After she left, I had made a promise to him to sell once the divorce was finalized. By noon the next day, I was a very wealthy man with nearly $27 million in assets after taxes, spread across different investment and cash accounts. Bill then surprised me with a big offer. "Tom, I don't know what your plans are, but I want you to consider something. I've told my board that I will step down at the end of the year and focus only on being the chairman. I'm 66 years old, and I'd like to bring in someone new to take over as CEO. I think you might be the right person for the job. I know it's not common for someone from an acquisition to become the CEO, but it has happened before. You would need to move to Sonoma on the West Coast, which is beautiful. Would you think about it? The salary and benefits are good, and you already know about our growth plans. Think it over and give me a call later. I'd love to chat more about it." I was shocked, to say the least. This was a company worth $300 million located in California's wine country. Napa had been on my list of places to consider living with Helen when I sold. Now that she was gone, I hadn't thought about it much, but it was coming back to me. That evening, I walked around my house, now a wealthy man, looking at the rooms that held memories of raising 2 children. I noticed the marks on the laundry room door where we measured the kids as they grew. There were many happy memories, but they felt distant. The choice was clear. "Bill, when can I fly out to talk about your offer? I'd like to see the area and meet your team." We agreed on the beginning of next week. I would spend the week there and then decide. Jason was a bit unsure about my move. Anne was excited. I was in between. I hadn't told them that I sold the company yet. Instead, I told them to check the business section of the next day's newspaper or look up Omega to see why I was considering the move. They didn't like the wait, but I enjoyed it. The next morning, the front page of the business section had the news of the sale. It showed a picture of Bill and me, along with promises that the company would continue operating in town. The purchase price of $40 million was also mentioned. I had asked for it to be included even though Bill preferred not to disclose it. I think he understood my reasons, especially since my divorce was finalized just 2 days earlier. One of the rules in the paperwork meant we couldn't change anything after filing. The divorce was straightforward and final. A few days later, I found myself in first class on a Boeing 767, heading for San Francisco International Airport. I had been divorced for just 6 days, and suddenly, every woman seemed more appealing. A long time ago, I thought airline attendants were especially attractive, and I still feel that way, even though now they're closer to my age. I guess it was just the fact that I hadn't been with someone in over 3 months. At least it showed I was still alive. That afternoon, I met with Bill and his team to discuss the business and its future plans. We were both sizing each other up, and I think we were pleased with what we found. Near the end of our meeting, Bill invited me into his office and made me an exciting offer. "Tom, I had dinner with the board last night, and they all agree with my proposal. We believe you are the right person for the position, and we want to show you just how serious we are. We're offering a 5-year contract with a starting salary of $1.4 million. You will also be eligible for bonuses that can reach 50% of your salary for achieving goals and up to 200% if you go beyond expectations. Of course, you'll enjoy a full package of benefits, too. You can choose a car and trade it every 2 years. We also have an executive condo in Sonoma for you to use if you'd like." It's a lot to think about, I know, Tom. I have to go to another meeting tonight, or I would have invited you to dinner. Let's set that up for later this week, since I know you're around. It was a great offer, and I didn't think it would take me long to decide, but I didn't want to rush my answer. We shook hands, and I headed back to my hotel in Napa. This salary was 5 times what I had been earning before, and that didn't even include the bonuses. I was 46 years old and not ready to slow down. I could work and enjoy the beautiful California weather and the lovely surroundings of Sonoma and Napa. Best of all, I could make the most of my time there. The next day, I accepted the job, and Bill introduced me to everyone on the team. He would step down on December 31st, which was 3 months away. In the meantime, I would be a senior consultant as if I had already started. The Sonoma condo was nice for now, and I was set to begin in 3 weeks. For the rest of the week, I enjoyed the wonderful sights and experiences of wine country. I had never been a big wine drinker, but I figured it was time to learn more. As I sat at the bar thinking about my new opportunity, I started wondering about Helen. Who was she with now? Why did she leave? Was our life together really that difficult? Until now, I hadn't let myself contemplate these questions. I wasn't grieving much, but I realized I hadn't fully moved on either. I could feel myself starting to miss having a partner. I realized that with my new job and financial stability, meeting women wouldn't be a challenge. Many were drawn to success, and while some might prioritize wealth, I never thought I was lucky enough to attract someone special, until now. I flew back home to finish up many tasks before I could move west. I called my kids to share the news of my job offer, and they were supportive. Jason was excited, especially when he saw how great the opportunity was. They both had seen the news about my recent sale and understood that I was doing well. I didn't mention that they were doing well too. Jason had graduated just before everything changed, earning a degree in mechanical engineering. Anne was set to finish her degree this December. She had even accepted a job offer at a local firm, but then discovered something troubling. When she went to the office for some pre-employment tests, she unexpectedly met her mother's new partner, who worked at the same company. It was quite a coincidence, and Anne decided to withdraw from the job immediately. She was very upset and expressed her feelings to her mother and her mother's partner quite clearly. I put our house up for sale right away. The kids were sad to leave, but understood. The house was worth a good amount, and it was paid off. I gave the kids anything they wanted from the house, but I kept the door to the laundry room. Some memories are too precious to let go. A week after listing it, I got a good offer and told the realtor to proceed with the sale. Anything we didn't want would be donated. I did ask Jason to let his mother take whatever she wished, but I didn't check if she took anything. Before I flew west, I visited my old workplace. Everyone knew I was the new CEO of the parent company, so we would meet again in the future. That day, I just wanted to enjoy their company, so I ordered pizza and drinks, and we spent some quality time together. After 3 weeks, I found myself back on a plane, heading towards a new adventure and a fresh start. It had been 122 days since Helen left, and now I was stepping out of my past. I adjusted well to my new role as a consultant, and the time flew by. The condo was nicely furnished, and the things I brought with me fit in perfectly. By the holidays, I had settled into a nice routine. This year was different because my family wasn't around for the holidays. My brother Carl usually visited with his wife and kids. We would either go to their home or they would come to mine. This time, I decided to call the kids to see what they wanted to do. It didn't make sense to fly everyone out to my place, so Carl and I agreed to have Thanksgiving at their home. I could bring the kids to visit me for Christmas if they wanted. Then Anne surprised me by asking if she could bring a friend along to meet me. I thought that if she was serious about this friend, it was time for us to meet. I had met Jason's friends before, so it wasn't new. It was a little strange for me to think about these things when it came to my daughter, but she was 21 and an adult now. Thanksgiving went smoothly. We all enjoyed ourselves. I sensed that Anne wanted to talk about her mother, but I wanted to avoid that topic. "All right, we can talk at Christmas," was all she said. A few days after coming back home, I was carrying 2 full bags of groceries up to my place when one of the bags ripped open. As I bent down to clean up the mess, I noticed her. She had dark hair with blonde highlights that made it look bright. She had a sun-kissed look that was typical for someone from California. Her smile was big and bright, framed with red lipstick. I felt like I was in a beach-themed movie, even though we were far from the coast. Overall, she looked fit and attractive. For the first time in years, I was momentarily lost for words. She filled the silence. "Hi, I'm Janet Carr. I live next door. Let me help you with that," she said with a friendly smile. I introduced myself, and we worked together to pick up the spilled groceries and put them on my kitchen counter. After we organized the mess, I offered her a drink, and she chose a glass of wine. We spent the next hour chatting, getting to know each other and discussing our condos, the building, and some of the other neighbors. I found out that she was recently divorced. At 42 years old, she had made a good life for herself after her husband's unfaithfulness. He was a lawyer who worked in the entertainment industry in Los Angeles, and as part of their settlement, they had agreed that he would buy her the condo. Now, she was doing well financially, supported by the settlement and alimony which amounted to millions, and she was back living in the area where she grew up. Her parents owned a vineyard and winery just down the road, and one day, it would belong to her. So, Tom, were you the one with the trouble, or was it your wife who caused the mess? I chuckled a bit because as far as I knew, I had never been in trouble like that. I shared a brief version of my story, and we lifted our glasses once more to all the unfortunate tales out there. Before she left, I did something I hadn't done in over 25 years. I made plans for the next night. There was a place I had started visiting when I wanted to get out of the house. They usually had a great jazz band playing. They were performing that night, so I made dinner reservations and planned to take Janet out for drinks and maybe some dancing afterward. When I picked her up, I was taken aback. She had done her hair and gone back to her natural brown. She wore a dark blue dress that was short and flattering. She looked slim and beautiful. When I moved here, I treated myself to a new Porsche 911 Carrera. I helped her into the seat, feeling proud. "I have one of these, a red one," she said. I laughed at that. It was just typical. Dinner was fantastic, and the drinks and dancing were enjoyable. We both danced well, and I had a wonderful time. When the night ended, I walked her to her door, wished her a good night, and thanked her for the lovely evening. She looked at me a bit shyly and said she enjoyed it too, and would I like to do it again soon? Of course, I wanted to. After she went inside, I strolled back to my place, feeling lighthearted, made myself a rum and soda, and settled into my easy chair. 15 minutes later, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Janet was there, a big smile on her face. I wasn't ready to end the night yet, and there's nothing on TV, so I thought we could have some fun. She came right in, full of energy. I grabbed a couple of items I had received as a joke gift, and we ended up having a great time together. I was overwhelmed by the wonderful night we shared. I fell asleep, and when I woke up, she had already left a sweet note thanking me for the evening. It definitely made me smile. That morning, I reflected on the night. I had an amazing time with someone I really connected with. She made me feel young again, and I truly wanted to see her again. This night stirred a desire for companionship. Could it just be with one person, Janet? Of course, it was possible. I naturally wanted to be in a committed relationship. But what about her? Only time would reveal the answer. Christmas was approaching, and the kids were coming to visit. Jason arrived first with his girlfriend, a nice young woman named Christine. I quietly reminded him to keep the door closed and the music playing, which he understood. The next day, Anne came over with a charming young man named Steve. He was well-behaved and polite, and I liked him. Anne took me aside and told me directly that she was in a relationship with him. She wanted me to be okay with it. I told her I was fine with it, and they took the third bedroom, so my house was busy. The following Saturday, Janet called and suggested we go to her parents' winery for a tasting and maybe dinner. I mentioned my kids and their partners were visiting, so she invited them too. "Tom, I can call my mom, and she'll set up more tables. They do this every year before Christmas. Last year there were about 50 guests, so we can definitely fit you in. Plus, I'd love to meet your kids." I agreed and shared the plan with Jason and Anne. They were interested, so we made arrangements. "Dad, so you're dating now?" Jason asked, smiling. Anne looked at me with a puzzled expression. I couldn't quite understand why, but I told myself we could discuss it later. "We've been out a couple of times and get along well. It's nice to have someone to enjoy meals with. I've missed that," I explained. "Dad, I'm happy for you. If you can find joy amidst everything going on, that's great." He was joking, but I appreciated his support. Anne smiled too, though I could sense something was bothering her. I would have thought she would be more encouraging about my dating life. I made a note of it, and we moved forward with our plans for the evening. It was a big event. There were at least 60 people there, not counting us. The kids took my car, and I drove with Janet. "Thanks for coming, Tom. I've wanted to introduce you to my mom. She's always curious about who I'm seeing, especially since she wasn't too thrilled with my last boyfriend. I know she'll like you. Moms can be so entertaining, especially when they're involved in our lives, right?" I lost my mom a few years back, shortly after my dad passed. It was a tough time as I was close to both of them, but now I cherish my memories. We arrived at the gravel parking lot with the kids not far behind. We made introductions and everyone started to mingle. Janet stayed by my side for a while before excusing herself to help with dinner preparations. I soon found myself engaged in a conversation with a couple of women who ran a nearby business incubator. One of them, Dana, insisted I visit their location for my thoughts. I didn't decline, and before I knew it, I had accepted an invitation to lunch. Two women caught the attention of many around them. They knew how to charm unsuspecting men with their looks. I noticed Janet talking with a man who seemed to be trying very hard to impress her. They looked at ease together, and I wondered if they had a history, though I might have been jumping to conclusions. As she turned to focus on the preparations, I noticed him leaning in a bit too closely. I had no claim over her, so it was no surprise others were interested, but I couldn't help feeling a twinge of envy. The rest of the evening unfolded as I expected. Janet and I sat together with two other couples and the man I had seen earlier. The kids were at another table. The man beside Janet occupied much of her conversation, and he was eager to engage her. The other couples were enjoyable company, and I learned that one of the men was the CEO of the financial group funding our new office building. They would own it and lease it back to us once it was finished next spring. His name was David Stone, and he had moved out here from Tennessee to lead Phoenix Financials, which was nearby in San Rafael. The other couple, Nigel and Pam Hegland, were also nice. Nigel worked at Phoenix as a financial analyst, while Pam was a wine consultant. I didn't know much about that then, but she happened to be Janet's cousin. It turned out that David's company was also involved in a business incubator project I had just visited. Overall, it was a productive dinner filled with business connections and networking. I learned that the man beside Janet was named Art Sajak. They had dated briefly after her divorce, but it didn't last, according to Pam. She seemed amused when she shared this information, which I found a bit odd. Before we left, I met Janet's mother. She had a warm, old-fashioned Italian charm about her. Even if no one else liked me, I felt she would. I also connected with David and Nigel over our shared interest in golf, and we made plans to play together the weekend after New Year's. Later that evening, Janet and I enjoyed each other's company. I savored the moments we shared, and afterward we rested peacefully. In the morning, I woke up to the wonderful smell of sausages and homemade English muffins with marmalade. Janet brought breakfast to me in bed without worrying about the crumbs. Once we were done eating, we shared a lovely moment together that felt special. I can't remember a better way to start my day. After we finished, I thanked her, and we refreshed ourselves with a shower. Then, I reminded her about my guests who were coming to visit. She understood and mentioned having to meet her cousin Pam for lunch. When I walked into the living room, the kids were sitting around in their casual clothes having breakfast. I glanced around and thought it was probably better that I had stayed elsewhere the night before. I felt like a dad saying this, but Christine looked quite grown up in her outfit. I excused myself for a moment to check on a few things in my room. When I came back, things looked much tidier, and everyone had dressed enough to run errands if needed. I chuckled to myself, remembering my own younger days. That afternoon, we decorated for Christmas. I had kept the decorations from our old house. The condo's owners' association had some rules about what we could do outside, but they had already set things up well. So, we decorated inside instead. The kids popped a couple of champagne bottles, and we turned it into a little celebration. It wasn't as grand as Rockefeller Center, but I was still proud of how it turned out. I brought out several bags of wrapped presents and placed them under the tree, and even hung stockings from the mantel above the fireplace. There were gifts for everyone, including Christine and Stephen, and Christmas was still 3 days away. Later that evening, Anne and I went for a walk. "Dad, have you ever thought about maybe talking to Mom about what happened?" I looked at my daughter closely and noticed a hint of emotion in her eyes, though it might have been just from the chilly evening. "Anne, you know how your mom left. She didn't even say goodbye. I haven't seen or spoken to her since that day. Honestly, I don't even have her phone number or address. And even if I did, I'm not sure I would reach out. What's bothering you? Last I heard, things were not good between us." I was surprised when she spoke up. "Dad, things aren't always as they seem, remember? I used to feel very differently about her. I really did, especially when I found out about everything. You know the job I took and then quit? That happened right after the divorce was final. It was the same day the news about selling your business appeared in the papers. Neither of them knew anything about it, and they looked so happy together. But none of us know the full story. How could you? I didn't understand until later. I looked my daughter in the eye. What happened, Anne? He let her down and left her with nothing, except for the money she saved before leaving us. She made sure to keep that private so he couldn't take it. Is she okay? Dad, she's fine. She's strong, if anything. It's quite a story if you want to hear it. I told her I might share it with you, and she didn't want me to, but I told her that was not her decision anymore. I was upset, I guess. Anne, you've told me enough to make me curious. I won't feel right until you share the whole story. She sighed and then took my hand, leading me to a bench. Okay, but let me talk without interruptions, Dad. I nodded, and she began to tell me the story. When she finished, I was completely stunned. But this was my daughter, and when I asked if she believed it, she nodded. Dad, I believe it. I saw her black eyes and bruises. She won't report it no matter what I said. Now she's living on Waterside in an apartment. She even got a job, can you believe that? She's working at the outplacement center where she used to volunteer. But everything that led up to this, I believe her, Dad. She's really hurt inside, and she's my mom, so I have to care about her. Yes, sweetie, you should care. You are her daughter. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this, but if you believe it, I will too. But you should know, Anne, our issues started long before just a few years back. They began around the time you went to college. Small problems grew into big ones, leading to all of this. I shared everything with you and Jason. I'll tell you what, if you give me her contact information, I'll see what I can do to help her for your sake. But about your first question, have I thought about getting back in touch? I expected her to walk back through the door many times over those 3 months, but she never did. Since I've been out here, I've tried not to look back other than to reach out to you and Jason. So no, I haven't thought about it. I hugged my daughter, wiped her tears, and we walked back to the condo. The other kids had made popcorn and were watching a movie. That's how we spent the rest of the evening. I didn't sleep much that night. What Anne told me kept bothering me until morning. I called my brother when I got up and asked him for a big favor. Well, I was paying for it anyway. I wanted him to hire someone to find out everything about Helen and the man she left with. I meant all the details. Family, work history, credit reports, and anything in their backgrounds. I was willing to pay whatever it took, and I didn't care how they got the information. Tom, this is a big request, but it can be done. Just don't ask how later. That was good enough for me. I didn't need to know the details. Christmas passed, and then New Year's came. Janet and I spent some time together during the holidays. After the kids returned home, she said something to me one evening while we were on the couch. All right, Tom, what's on your mind? You seem troubled. I realized she understood me well. I shared my worries with her and how I needed to sort some things out for my daughter. Why is this so hard? Just take a trip back there and talk it out for good. You haven't had a face-to-face yet, and I think that's important to move on if that's what you want. Her last words made me think, sure, if that's the outcome. You won't know until you go there, and honestly, I won't know either. So, if there's a chance for something more than just good times together, you need to do this. She was right. I enjoyed my time with Janet and felt a strong connection. I needed some kind of closure, so I booked my flight the next morning. Carl called as I headed to the airport and told me he was sending some files to my email. He had gathered a lot of information on Helen's new partner that I might find helpful. The files arrived just before I boarded my flight, and I started going through them over the next few hours. The Waterside was a new apartment complex in the Concourse neighborhood. They weren't the most luxurious places, but they were expensive enough to attract a certain crowd. It was hard to believe she had moved from our spacious 5-bedroom house with a big yard to a place like this. How could she just leave everything behind? That's why I found myself on the sidewalk at 7 p.m., looking at the front door of 1792 Faring Lane. I had called her earlier to see if this was a good time to talk. She quickly invited me for dinner, but I turned it down. I wanted to talk, not eat. When she left, she took half our savings, which meant she had nearly $600,000. If Anne was right and she had saved some money, she could manage for a while if she lived simply, especially if she was working now. I almost turned away, but Janet's words kept echoing in my mind. I had to do this. Helen answered the door, and we stood quietly for a moment before she invited me into her home. As I expected, it was modestly furnished. She was dressed in gray slacks and a light shirt with a dove print. She wore small pearl earrings and a silver necklace. If her fingers had been adorned too, she could have been mistaken for my wife of 25 years. "Thank you for coming, Tom." "Still rum and coke?" she asked. "Yes, please." I watched her move to the kitchen and prepare the drink, just like she had done many times before. She still looked good and had maintained her appearance. With drinks in hand, we found ourselves avoiding the big issue. It had been over 7 months since that difficult Friday, and our lives had changed so much. I took out the letter she had left for me and started to read. Her expression shifted, and I could see her lose some of the courage she had built up for our meeting. I reached the end of the letter where it said, "Until I can face you again, know that I will always love you." I set the letter down without finishing that line and turned to Helen, asking the question I really wanted to know. It wasn't why. "Have you ever wished you had done things differently, Helen?" She looked at me, trying to understand, and then she seemed shaken. "Tom, 1,000,000 times a day since that day. Honestly, I wish I had never left at all. Writing that letter and leaving like that will stay with me forever. I know I can never forgive myself, and I worry about what others think too." Helen, I talked with Anne over the holidays, and she shared many things you both discussed about you, us, and your new life. Don't blame her, though. I got most of it out of her. It was affecting our relationship, and I had to know. I guess for me to understand everything, I need to hear it from you directly. Are you willing to share that? "Tom, I'll tell you the whole story if you want, but I will need more than this wine." She poured more for both of us. "I suppose I should start somewhere, but I'm not sure where the beginning is. For now, let's start with that Friday when I left. I wanted to jump in and share what I thought was the beginning, but I held back. This was her story. I wrote that letter 4 times before I finally settled on the one you have now. If I could go back in time, I would have ripped up my plans and just waited for you at home. But instead, I had a new beginning waiting for me, full of hope and happiness. You know, the kind of story where a prince saves a princess from a dull life? Those stories are often just a fantasy. Now that I think about it, my view on life has changed quite a bit since reality hit me hard. It felt like a fairy tale back then, a childish dream. Honestly, if my mother had been here, she would have been very upset with me. I had everything, Tom. We had everything. A loving family, 2 wonderful kids growing up, and finally time to pursue our dreams. But what did I do? I lost myself in my own thoughts. While Sally and Jenny were living vibrant lives, getting involved in volunteering and activities, I felt stuck. A couple of years ago, I started volunteering at the Outreach Center. I met many new people there. Sally was working with me, and at one point, she began a relationship with someone from a corporate sponsor. After that, all she talked about was how invigorating it was to be with someone new. I didn't approve of her choices, and I think she realized that. Despite this, she tried to set me up with one of the guy's friends. Eventually, I got to know Charles. He wasn't pushy or trying to rush things. He was just nice to have lunch or dinner with when I could. For a long time, we kept it friendly. But he knew I was married, and that should have made things clear. Over time, our friendship began to feel more special. I knew it wasn't the right path, but I found myself drawn into it. A few months before I left, I was at his apartment for lunch, and things started to feel a bit too intimate. I realized I needed to stop it before it went too far. Luckily, he respected my choice. I just couldn't betray you like that. The reason I'm sharing this with you, Tom, is to be honest. I never crossed that line with anyone else while we were married, not even once. I couldn't do it. Charles didn't like waiting, but he agreed to it. I felt I couldn't hurt you by being unfaithful. Instead, I believed I had fallen in love, and I ended up losing the real love I always had with you. When I decided to file for divorce, I didn't tell Charles that I wanted nothing from our marriage. I felt guilty for what had happened, and I believed I had no right to anything. He didn't know about my savings, and I kept that from him. That Monday evening, after my lawyer informed me that you had signed the papers, I decided not to start my relationship with Charles until our marriage was officially over. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I was already having doubts but felt too scared to change my mind. Charles was very upset. He was mad, but I managed to calm him down and promised him everything he wanted once the divorce was finished. I realize now how foolish I was. My lawyer gave me the final papers, and that's when I gave Charles what he wanted. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being so cheap. He was a selfish partner. Everything nice about him was just an act. I tried to put on a good front. I could tell the kids were upset with me, especially Anne. I ran into her with Charles. It broke my heart because I knew I had hurt her. She called me terrible names, and Charles did too. That day was tough, and things didn't get better for a while. About a week later, Charles burst into the kitchen where I was and was furious. He threw a newspaper in front of me, demanding to know why I didn't take advantage of an opportunity from the article. I had no idea what he was talking about. I picked it up and saw a picture of you with another man, so I started reading the article. Tom, halfway through, I couldn't help but laugh. I was genuinely happy for you, and it felt like you were getting back at me in the best way. I didn't deserve anything after what had happened, and I told Charles that. He asked if I knew about it, and I lied, saying yes. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have done that. He then reacted in a way that was difficult to endure. After that, he crossed a line that shouldn't be crossed. I wish I could tell myself it was just rough, but it wasn't. He mistreated me in a way no one should endure. Anyone who says that it can't happen if you have had a relationship with someone is wrong. It was painful for me. The hardest part is that I let it happen. I didn't report it, even when Anne begged me to. I called her that night for help, and I was surprised when she agreed to pick me up. I knew she was angry with me. If I can find anything good in this, it restored my relationship with my daughter. She helped me move to a new place, and I managed to settle in. I've been living here ever since. I even found a job. She smiled weakly at me, and I sat there unsure of what to say. Everything she shared was similar to what Anne had told me. She hadn't been unfaithful while we were married, if I could believe her. She regretted what had happened. She had suffered at the hands of someone cruel. She felt sorry for what she did. I don't know what to say, Helen. You made some really poor choices, and it's hard to know where to start, I replied. I got up and went into the kitchen. I made 2 more drinks, and we sat down at her kitchen table. It was the old table from our dining room. A friend told me that I needed to find peace about our marriage and divorce. She was right. I can't really move on until my feelings are settled. I don't think I'll ever understand why you did what you did. Honestly, why didn't I leave first? Our marriage was a mess, and by the time you left, we had let it fall apart. I don't know how it got to that point, but it did, and I didn't do anything to stop it. I let you drift away, and that's a heavy weight to carry. You know, I did mourn Helen for about 15 minutes. I cried the whole time, and when I was done, I opened a bottle of rum I had saved. Do you remember that old bottle I got last year in Puerto Rico? I finished it over the weekend. I set my plans in motion on Monday morning and made decisions with Carl later that same day. I decided I would live my life by my new rules. Helen, I always planned to sell the business and take us somewhere fresh. But life had other plans, and I'm living it very differently than I expected. Anne asked if I thought we could ever go back to what we had, and I told her no. I'm not the same Tom I was last year, and you're not the same Helen either. She looked a bit anxious, but nodded in agreement. Tom, I created this situation, and I regret it. People have told me to ask for your forgiveness, to do anything to win you back. But I know you, Tom. You have a kind heart. But when you said you only mourned for 15 minutes before moving on, it confirmed what I've known for over 25 years. If I could go back in time, I would spend my life making it right with the one man I've always loved. But I see that you've moved on, and it's too late. Tears filled her eyes, and mine too. We both lost something important. Tom, can you hold me one last time? I did, for a long time. Memories of our 25 years together rushed through my mind. From our wedding to our children's births and the vacations we took. Friends and family filled my thoughts. Everything that made our life together. It hurt deeply. When I let her go, she looked into my eyes and said, "Goodbye, Tom. You are the only man I will ever love." She turned away, tears running down her face, and hurried back to her room. I stood there for a moment, contemplating whether to go after her, but then grabbed my coat and walked out. After talking with Helen, I lay awake in bed most of the night. Since Anne was hosting me, I knew I had to tell her about our conversation. or she would keep asking until I did. There wasn't much new for her to hear, so it was more of a confirmation. So there's really no chance of getting back together. Sweetheart, I've learned not to say things absolutely, but would you really want two unhappy people together forever? Dad, if you were unhappy, then no, but you haven't really figured things out in your mind, have you? My daughter and I had a close bond. She could see through me, and she was right. I felt uneasy, like I had unfinished business that kept nagging at me. I thought this trip would help me find closure, but instead, I spent sleepless nights. So the next day, I took a long flight back to San Francisco, a couple of days earlier than planned. I had made a decision that gave me some comfort. Carl's reports about Charles Madison showed he was a difficult partner, having been married and divorced 3 times and arrested for mistreating others. It puzzled me how Helen ended up with him. She was smart, but it seemed it took significant challenges for her to realize her situation. At least I took comfort in the fact that she ended things quickly with him. Charles Madison was involved with 2 other women who were also married. I asked Carl to investigate further, and he found proof of this. He shared that information with their spouses and with his workplace. I later learned that both women divorced him, leaving Charles without a job. It was an overnight flight, and I got to the airport parking lot around 2 a.m. After having a quick late-night meal, I arrived at my condo around 5 a.m. I took a moment to soak in my surroundings. It was very quiet outside, and the nightlight in my entrance cast soft shadows from the other apartments. With my window down, I felt the cool air on my face, and even the bugs were silent. Just then, the door to Unit 38 opened and a man walked out adjusting his hat. He had a confident stride as he got into a gray Porsche Boxster. I recognized him. His name was Art Sajak, but he didn't live there. A woman named Janet did. The next morning, I overslept a bit, and since it was Thursday, I didn't need to be back at the office for a few more days. I called Bill at Omega to let him know I was back in town a little earlier in case he needed anything. I got busy with work and decided to grab a quick snack at a nearby cafe. "Hello there." I looked up and saw Dana, a woman I'd met a few weeks ago at Janet's parents' place. "Good morning," I replied warmly. "Feel free to join me. I'm just having a pastry and coffee." She sat down with me, and we enjoyed a lovely conversation over brunch for about an hour. Dana reminded me of my promise to visit their business incubator, and I agreed to go the next morning. I liked spending time with her. She was an interesting person. With her tall stature, dark hair, and smooth skin, she was easy to talk to. Later that afternoon, I called my brother Carl. He had set up some bank accounts in Helen's name. After he shared the important details, I transferred $5 million into those accounts. I knew some people might not understand my choice, but I was happy with it. I didn't want someone else taking what I had worked for, and my daughter had asked me to do something special for her, which always moved me. I felt that Helen deserved a part of what I earned over the years we were together. I couldn't have built my business without her help at home, even if I didn't notice all the little things she did. If things had gone differently, she could have taken much more than $5 million from me. I didn't see Janet that day, so she had no idea I had come back earlier than expected. I was in Unit 34, a corner condo with 2 floors and a lovely patio. Janet's place was at the other end of the building, and since we couldn't see each other, I thought that was for the best that evening. We hadn't discussed the nature of our relationship, even though I believed adults should communicate if things weren't serious. That conversation never happened. At 1 a.m., I noticed the little car was back, and I decided to call it a night. I wondered if it was because I hadn't been involved in a relationship for so long, or if I was feeling a bit possessive. Whatever the reason, I was irritated when I saw the car was gone again the next morning. I thought about Dana, the tall woman with lovely skin. I picked up the phone and called her. "Hi, Dana, good morning. This is Tom Davis. Are you free for lunch today? I'd like to come and see your office if that works for you." "Noon sounds great. I'll meet you there." With that, we planned a lunch date. I had an idea for one of the workspaces in her building that I had been thinking about for a while. My son Jason is great with electronics and knows a lot about robotics. He understands how things work and how to connect the circuits. I'm good with software. I can manage the brain of a project. Jason can build and operate its body, even though he just finished school. So I met with Dana and Gail, her partner whom I had met before Christmas. I checked out their place, and when we finished, I shared my idea with them. They were surprised because this visit was supposed to be just social. I wanted a workspace to use, and I got it at a reasonable cost. This space was meant to be a fun project outside my responsibilities at Omega. I wanted to create a business for my kids and enjoy the process. I called Jason to share my plans. Dad, this is a lot to take in all at once. Can I have some time to think and figure out how this all fits together? I assured him he could take all the time he needed. Next, I called Anne. Anne, how's the job search going? She still hadn't found the right job after she left the one where her mother's partner would be working with her. She passed on a couple of good offers that I thought she should have accepted. I guess younger generations do things differently. I explained everything I was planning and what I had discussed with Jason. We needed someone who could help with marketing and sales. Though she had no experience, she was excited about the opportunity and quickly said yes. Then, I called my brother Carl. I asked him to manage the business details, including setting up our operations in California and arranging for insurance. By the end of the day, the Davis family had the start of something new. It was Friday, so I decided to take the weekend off and be ready for the office on Monday. Now that I was the CEO of Omega, life was about to get busy. I packed my bag and headed to the airport by 5 p.m. for a quick flight to Las Vegas. I still hadn't seen Janet, but I was leaving around the same time as my previous trip. It didn't matter much anymore. By midnight, I had lost a significant amount while gambling, but I had enjoyed myself. I tried not to dwell on that little car too often that night. By Sunday afternoon, my losses from gambling were mostly balanced out. I had indulged in too much food and had been approached a few times by people looking for help with their living expenses. My steam valve had been open for most of my time away, and now I was ready to return to reality. When I got home that evening, Jason and Anne were sitting on my front step, enjoying sandwiches and chips. "It's about time you got here. Do you ever answer your phone?" Anne asked. I had forgotten to turn my phone back on, and honestly, I just hadn't thought about it. I wanted to take a break from everything. "I'm sorry, I didn't think," I replied. "That's okay. Your message let us know when to expect you. Plus, we just arrived," she said. "Come on in," I invited them. I got them settled into their rooms. I didn't ask about Cynthia and Stephen, their partners, over Christmas break. Jason mentioned he would be working from home for a project before officially leaving his job in a month. I told them they were on their own while I jumped into work. I gave them each $50,000 and told them to open bank accounts, find a place to live, and get comfortable over the next few days. First thing Monday morning, I walked through the offices, introducing myself to everyone I could. I think I met nearly everyone by noon before joining a group of programmers in the cafeteria for lunch. That afternoon, I sat down with Bill, who was now the chairman of the board. We talked about strategies and ongoing business. When we finished, I told him about my plans for Jason and Anne, wanting to avoid any issues. He was fine with it, especially when I suggested using company resources for software development. After our meeting, we made dinner plans, and I returned to the executive suite to connect with my staff. 4 people worked in my suite. My administrative secretary, a lovely woman named Marge, kept pictures of her 3 grandchildren on her desk. She seemed quite young to be a grandmother. I adored my own grandmother, but she didn't look as youthful as Marge. I also had 3 administrative aides, all young women, each well-dressed. It seemed like Bill preferred to hire women. He had already told me about their impressive qualifications. After meeting each of them, we got back to business, and I ended the day. Over the next few days, I focused on company activities, arriving early and staying late. If I thought I had a social life, that idea quickly faded unless business lunches and dinners counted. There were plenty of those. Jason and Anne took care of the connection with Dana and Gail at the business incubator. They decided to share a 3-bedroom apartment for a while to save money and give me some space. They were adults who were used to living independently, and to be honest, so was I. I needed that personal space. It took them less than a week to get settled in their new place. It was Friday evening at 10 p.m. I was on my patio enjoying a drink and a cigar when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Janet was standing there. I didn't know what to say at first, so I welcomed her inside and took her jacket. It had been over a week since I saw Art leaving her condo early in the morning, and he had done it again last Friday. So, Tom, how are you? She seemed a bit tipsy as she spoke. Janet, I'm doing okay. I'm quite busy at work in my new job as expected. Looks like you started the weekend early. I tried to laugh, but I felt a bit uneasy. Yeah, my cousin Pam came over earlier and we had a few drinks. I talked with your daughter Anne a couple of days ago. She told me you were really busy, so I didn't want to bother you. But since it's Friday night and you're free, I thought I'd drop by. The conversation felt awkward, so I made her a drink, refreshed mine, and we went out to the patio. I had the fire pit going, so it was cozy despite the cool air. We settled into chairs, taking in the peaceful evening, enjoying the warmth of the fire while we chatted. She did the same, and then she broke the silence. My mom has breast cancer. She looked down and started to cry softly. I didn't know what to say, so I got up and comforted her. As she cried on my shoulder, I couldn't help but think of Art and the time they had spent together while I was away. I also thought about her mom, who I genuinely liked. Strangely, it reminded me of how Helen had comforted me when my own mom was sick. When did you find out? I asked gently. I found out a week and a half ago while you were back east. I've been with her since, except when I came back a couple of days ago to talk with Anne. You've been away since the middle of last week? Who was taking care of your condo? Pam asked Art to keep an eye on it. You met him at Mom's Christmas dinner. He's the one who's always been a bit charming toward me, much to your annoyance. She managed a small smile, and her tears were starting to dry. I decided to share what I knew. I guess that's why he was there so often. She looked at me, confused. What do you mean, so often? He was just supposed to check it quickly each morning. Well, I saw him leave at 5 a.m. last Friday and come back at 1 a.m. Saturday. His car was gone when I got up. That guy. Wait a minute. She looked at me with sadness in her eyes. You thought he was with me while you were away? I nodded and she hugged me tightly, shaking her head. Tom, I know I'm not perfect, but I wouldn't betray you like that. I sometimes feel a longing for connection, and if you're here, you're the one I want to reach out to. Let's sit down for a moment. Tom, my mom will be fine. She's scheduled for surgery next Tuesday, and the doctors believe they can remove everything since the tumor is small and not near any important areas. I'm just feeling a bit worried. Now about Art. I've known him for a long time. We dated before I got married. After my divorce, we had a brief romance, but it wasn't anything serious for me. To him, I was just someone to pass the time with. I haven't seen him in over a year, so I'm not sure why he stayed the night here. I'll need to ask him about it. I turned off the fire and we went back inside. Janet, why don't you stay here tonight? We can check your condo together in the morning. That's what she decided to do. We didn't do anything inappropriate, even though she slept in my bed. As I listened to her breathing while she slept, I thought about how I felt. I really liked her. I think I trusted her. I believed we could have something special if we worked on it. She was attractive, and we had a great connection. In the morning, I noticed something unusual. After we got ready and dressed, we walked over to her condo to check on everything. Janet, come here, I called from the master bedroom. When she entered, I pointed to a small camera hidden among some scarves on her dresser. I recognized it right away from my work with similar devices. It was a high-definition camera that could record even in low light, positioned to capture activity in the room. I explained what the camera was and its capabilities. However, I didn't know where the receiver was located. It would need a Wi-Fi connection, and with many available in the area, it could be anywhere nearby. Janet, who has been in your condo besides you? Tom, and it could have been my mom, my cousin Pam, Art, or maybe my dad when he visited. Stay here for a few minutes. I'll be right back. I went back to my place and searched through my utility closet. Finally, I found what I was looking for. It was a basic RF detector with a remote that would light up if it picked up a signal nearby. When I got back and searched the condo, I found nothing, so I placed the detector behind the mirror, turned it on, and checked the light on the remote in my hand. Everything was clear, which was a relief. The lens was closed, indicating it wasn't active. Janet, here's the deal. I'm not sure how long this has been here or who put it here. I don't think it was your mom or dad, and Pam doesn't seem like the type. I know it wasn't me, so that leaves Art. Here's what we're going to do. I had to persuade her a bit, but I thought our secret observer would be interested in what was happening. Later that evening, Janet parked her car in front of the garage to signal that she was home. She had me on speed dial, with the RF remote on the dresser, easy to see. If the blue light turned on, she would call me quietly while going about her routine. She relaxed in her comfortable attire and walked around her condo with a glass of wine, enjoying her evening and creating a setting that would intrigue anyone observing. Around 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Janet calling. I quietly moved around the corner of the building, looking for signs of activity. If someone was watching from a distance, they would have to be nearby, probably in a car outside. Sure enough, there he was. He sat in a small Porsche Boxster, clearly engaged with what was happening. I pressed the key a few times to signal Janet to continue with her evening. It wasn't anything new for him, and this would keep him occupied for what came next. Detective Tate from the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office walked with me towards the Boxster. Art was enjoying a view of Janet when the detective approached, opened the door to the Porsche, and instructed Art to exit the vehicle slowly while asking me to step back. I complied, and Art was arrested on several charges. I picked up my phone and said, "It's over." I noticed Janet quickly leaving the room before returning, dressed appropriately, and then she stepped outside. Art was in the back of the patrol car, and the officer spoke with Janet while I stood off to the side. Once the conversation ended, the officer asked me a few more questions, shook my hand, took the laptop, and headed into the condo with me close behind. After a short while, Art was in custody. I hope the people at the sheriff's office understood the situation and didn't misinterpret anything regarding Janet. If they did, Marge Tate, my secretary and Detective Tate's wife, would surely have something to say. The next morning was bright and sunny. I felt relieved knowing that the troublemaker was in custody. Waking up next to a wonderful woman, I remembered I had some tasty sausages in the fridge and decided to make breakfast for her. Janet's mom had her surgery, and the doctor reported everything looked good. While there is no complete cure for cancer, there was hope for remission following the operation. The kids were excited about their new business called Soft Tech Robotics. Carl managed all the legal matters, and I had given them a loan to support their research and development. By summer, Jason had hired a tech worker to assist in creating a prototype for a biotech company in South San Francisco. If successful, we would be ready to scale production. The prototype was well received, and Jason and Anne secured a location for production in San Rafael. Omega continued to provide programming services, though I stepped back from negotiations to avoid any conflicts. Within a year, Softtech operated 6 days a week with 12-hour shifts. Business thrived for both Softtech and Omega. Janet and I had developed a relationship that was exclusive. I didn't date anyone else, and as far as I knew, she wasn't seeing anyone either. We even discussed the future, but Janet wasn't ready for that level of commitment, and I found myself uncertain as well, reflecting on my more traditional views. Tom, you still love her, don't you? Helen had come to visit the kids in their new homes in San Rafael. It had been a couple of years since our divorce, and the support I provided her allowed her the freedom to visit the children without financial worry, which made me feel good. Yes, Janet, I always will. We had about 20 wonderful years together before things changed. We raised 2 great kids, and that love doesn't just disappear, it becomes something different. Do I wish things had stayed the same? Of course, but that's not how life works. I paused for a moment, realizing I had drifted into my thoughts. Janet got up, filled her wine glass, and brought me a fresh rum and coke. Tom, would you be upset if I told you I've spoken to Helen? Oh, well, it doesn't matter, she chuckled. I've had lunch with her a few times, and I can see how much she cares for you, but she's having a tough time moving on. She can't seem to look at another man. Did you know she still wears a ring on her left hand? Your daughter feels the same. Helen would rather be alone than be with someone else. I imagined Helen living alone forever, and it stirred 2 different feelings inside me. One side felt indifferent, thinking she built her own life based on her choices. The other side mourned the huge loss we both faced, not just from her choices, but also from the gap of the years before everything changed. There are people I've noticed who talk a lot about seeking revenge and getting what they want from someone's pain. The problem is, whether it's the bartender down the street or a colleague at lunch, They have never faced the real hurt that comes from such actions. It's not something for the faint-hearted. It breaks people down, including the one who seeks revenge. I'm not like that. Helen was my love for a long time, and I still cared for her, even if I disliked her actions. I glanced over at Janet, who was sitting comfortably on my couch. Janet, I'm not upset that you've talked to Helen. If it helps her, I'm all for it. But you should understand that she really affected what was left of our marriage. We've both changed so much. I love the Helen from before, but I can't love the person she became when she left me that day. The truth is, I wasn't sure if I believed what I had just said, and I think Janet could tell. I knew the truth from that evening when I stood at her apartment, wondering whether to push open that bedroom door. I still had feelings for her, but couldn't move past what had happened. Tom, I'm not going anywhere, and before I tell you what I really think, I want you to know that soon I'm going to change into something more comfortable. I'm going to spend some quality time with you. But first, I want you to promise me something. I want you to take Helen out, even if it's just to talk. If all you do is enjoy a meal and chat about the kids, that's fine. She needs this, and so do you. You both require a friendly relationship to move forward, and right now, you don't have that. I couldn't help but laugh. You've got this all planned out, haven't you? She nodded with a smile. Anne and I set it up, and no, it's not a scheme. She was happy to see us together. She wanted her mom and dad to have a connection that wasn't affected by their divorce or by anything that happened in the past. I was meant to support her dad while she focused on her mom. Smart thinking, right? I simply nodded and left it at that. She kept her promise. She changed into something more comfortable, and we shared a moment that felt special. When it was over, I whispered, "Yes, it was clever," in her ear. The next day at work, business matters took over for a bit. My boss, Bill, had been negotiating with a German company for several months, and things were finally moving forward. Tom, this is a $300 million deal that will give us a strong position in both European and Asian markets for the new software our biotech team has developed. It's a fantastic chance. Bill, this is a major decision. What are your thoughts on managing it from here in Germany? The board and I have discussed it. The organization needs a full restructure. We'd like you to take on the task, but just temporarily. While you handle that, I'll take over your role until you're back here for good. Can you do it? I wanted some time to think, but when the chairman asks for a big favor, it's hard to say no. I nodded, and we worked out the details. For a whole year? Janet asked. That's a long time to be away. Why don't you come with me? I'll be back every month or so. Janet looked outside for a moment before turning back to me. I can't, Tom. I need to be here with my mom. Her mom had fought hard against breast cancer, but her health was starting to decline in other ways. Janet had been spending more time with her lately and even thought about moving back home. Her dad was around less, leaving the management of their vineyard to someone he trusted. Okay, we'll figure something out, I promise, I said to reassure her. She smiled at me. Now, remember what we talked about last night? You're going to do it, right? I recalled our conversation. She wanted me to take Helen out for dinner or something similar. It felt unusual for a woman to encourage her partner to go out with someone else. I knew Helen well, her personality, her preferences, and everything we shared. I once counted it up. In our 25 years of marriage, I had shared special moments with Janet about 2,000 times. It was a risky thought, and Janet likely had an idea of that too. If she brought us together again, maybe familiarity would spark something new. Helen has always been a very appealing woman, and I've felt drawn to her since our time together, even during a visit to her apartment a couple of years ago. Helen was staying with Anne. Just like during my last visit at her place by the water, I stood outside her door for a moment, unsure if I should walk in. I hadn't spoken to her since that night. She'd tried to reach out to me after I sent money to her accounts, but I didn't respond. I never visited her when she was with Anne or at Jason's if I knew she'd be there. It wasn't because I was upset. It just reminded me too much of what we had lost. For many divorced couples, the pain fades with time. For me, it only seems to grow. To cope with that feeling, I've kept my distance. Now, I stood at the door, waiting. Hello, Tom. Hello, Helen, you look well? I gave her a friendly hug. She really did look good. She was fit and healthy, with beautiful hair and stylish clothing. The soft gray dress suited her perfectly, and her smile made the pearls around her neck shine. The matching earrings were a gift I had given her a few birthdays ago. "Still like rum and coke?" I nodded, and in no time she had a drink ready for me and wine for herself. We sat comfortably on the couch. "Tom, it's been a while since we talked. I have a lot I want to share, but I don't know where to start," I gently interrupted, smiling. "Helen, there's no rush. I thought we could catch up and talk about the kids, family stuff, you know? Plus, I want to take you to dinner. I have reservations at Morimoto's in Napa for 7:30. We have a couple of hours before then, so I thought it would be nice to enjoy the ride." We talked and finished our drinks before she put on her jacket, and we headed to the car. I had brought the Porsche this time. As I helped Helen into her seat, she smiled at me in a way that reminded me of simpler times. The ride was pleasant, and we chatted about many topics, avoiding anything too heavy. I shifted gears for fun and noticed her excitement each time the car sped up. She looked like a young girl, thrilled by the experience. It felt like it was 25 years ago, before life got complicated. By the time we arrived and parked, it was nearly our reservation time, so we headed into the restaurant. I have always loved this place. Every time I walk in, the mix of gray and yellow colors, along with the displays, makes me feel like I'm in a big Japanese-style living room. There are comfortable sofas, soft chairs, big wooden tables, and a long sushi bar. I picked this restaurant not only because it's the best Japanese spot in town, but also because Helen and I have always enjoyed the food. We were seated at a cozy table off to the side, and we ordered drinks and some appetizers. Janet mentioned wanting to go out, so that's what I was doing. At some point, we started talking about Anne and what she was doing lately. "Tom, I'm a bit worried about Anne. I'm not sure how to talk to her. I really don't feel I can give her advice. I'm just glad she still cares about me," Helen said, her eyes glistening. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "She told me she doesn't want to marry or have a family. She doesn't believe in that anymore, and I think it's because of me. I know she didn't say it directly, but I feel it's true." Anne had never shared these feelings with me, so I was surprised. For as long as I could remember, Anne always dreamed of growing up, meeting someone special, and having a family with a house and a yard. I hesitated to ask, knowing what her answer might be. "Helen, why do you think you're the reason?" "Because of what happened between us. It changed how she sees relationships. If two people who care for each other can part ways, how can she trust anyone else? She didn't expect it, and that's why she was so upset with me at first." "Did she tell you this?" I asked. "Tom, I can read between the lines." She shared some thoughts, and I understood the rest. When our food arrived, we decided to put that conversation on hold and instead talked about the delicious dishes and some of our happy memories together. It was a lovely dinner. We both laughed and enjoyed ourselves. Afterward, I mentioned my upcoming trip to Heidelberg. Helen reacted in a familiar way. "For a whole year?" she asked. "Probably, but I'm sure I'll travel back and forth a few times while I'm there. It's an important project." I hadn't explained my job to Helen before. I think she believed I was just living off the money from selling my business. She seemed genuinely worried about me being away. "You know, things could be worse. They could send me to a place far away, like Timbuktu or somewhere similar," I joked. "Heidelberg is a nice city to enjoy work and fun for a while." Before getting the car, we strolled around downtown Napa for some window shopping and to enjoy the sights. When I brought her back to Anne's place, it was getting late, and she made me a cup of coffee. "Tom, you can stay here for the night if you want," she said with a smile. I raised an eyebrow, and she just smiled back. "I mean, there are 3 bedrooms here, and Anne is away for the weekend. I promise I'll be respectful. It's late, and driving back to Sonoma now wouldn't be smart. Besides, Janet isn't waiting for you tonight." Her friendly smile was charming, and it made sense. It was almost midnight, and it would be a long drive. I had stayed in the room at the end of the hall before, so I decided to stay. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I fell asleep. I think I got up once to use the bathroom, and without thinking, I walked down the hallway. That's how I do it at home. It was only when I got to the bathroom that I remembered I wasn't alone. Luckily, I made it back without anyone noticing. The next morning, I woke up to find myself next to a lovely woman, Helen, who had come into my bed during the night and was still sleeping. She looked very peaceful, and I wanted to let her stay that way for a bit longer. I couldn't remember the last time I had looked at her like this. It had been years since she left. Gently getting out of bed, I grabbed my robe and went to the bathroom. After getting ready, I went to the kitchen to see what breakfast items I could find. I was excited to discover more English sausages. While I was cooking, Helen came out looking fresh and a little nervous. She looked right at me. "I hope you're not upset with me, Tom," she said. I understood what she meant, but I wasn't upset. She just needed some comfort in the moment, and that was okay. If I had been awake, maybe things would have been different. I gave her a light hug and reassured her. "Helen, you don't need to worry. I'm not mad or bothered. Plus, you've never been a blanket hog," I joked. She laughed happily, teasing that while she wasn't, I certainly could be. We enjoyed breakfast, cleaned up, and decided to take a walk. After some time, we found a cafe downtown and decided to stop for coffee. We had just gotten comfortable when I saw a woman excitedly waving at us. It was Pam, with her husband Nigel. She came over and insisted we join them at their table since there was extra space. I introduced Helen as my former significant other because I never liked saying ex-wife. Pam mentioned that this was one of their favorite cafes. They had been married for a little over a year, and their excitement for each other was contagious. Helen looked at Pam with a playful smile. "You're expecting a baby, aren't you?" "Yes, 2 months along. How did you know?" "I don't think I look it yet," Pam replied. "Oh, yes, you do. You keep rubbing your belly and I can see it in your face and smile." Everyone laughed together. Nigel wanted to plan a round of golf, but I told him it might have to wait until I returned from Germany. "Tom, did you hear that David and Marilyn Stone are traveling to Mannheim next month for 2 months before heading to Italy? Our company is making a big move, and David is finalizing the deal this week. He's taking his team with him for some changes, and Marilyn is joining him." "I'll have to call him, Nigel. Mannheim is very close to where I'll be. It's just a short ride between the two places. What a coincidence." After we finished our time together, we said our goodbyes. When I returned to Anne's place, I grabbed my bag and tossed it in the seat. "Helen, I had a wonderful time. I'd love to do this again sometime. It feels great to reconnect with my old friend." She turned her head and I couldn't see her eyes. When she looked back, her eyes were teary. She hugged me tightly and, standing on her toes, whispered softly, "Tom Davis, I made mistakes in the past, but not anymore. I will always care for you, and if there's a higher power, I hope you'll take me home one day." With that, she turned and moved to her room, closing the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, realizing this wasn't just a memory, and thought about going back to her before grabbing my coat and leaving. I knew I would be back. The Sunday drive back to my condo was relaxed. I had many thoughts spinning in my mind. Years ago, I thought life would be easier after the kids grew up and I sold the business. I imagined enjoying life at a slow pace, but instead I find myself divorced and in a new relationship. I started a new business with my kids, working hard as the CEO of a successful company, and now I'm heading to Europe for a big company reorganization for the next year. On top of it all, I've started a friendly relationship with my ex-wife, who still seems to have lingering feelings for me, and it's affecting how my daughter sees herself and her future. Later that evening, Janet and I grilled shrimp at her place and enjoyed a quiet meal. I couldn't quite figure out what she was thinking, but it felt like she had a plan. We talked about my date night with Helen, and when I mentioned that I spent the night there, a big grin spread across her face. It didn't matter that I slept in a separate guest room. I sensed an understanding from her about the night's events. Maybe it's just a California thing. I wasn't sure, but Janet was very engaged later that evening and seemed eager to connect on a deeper level. Afterward, we wrapped up together and spoke softly into the night. My trip to Germany was coming soon, and there were many thoughts on my mind. "Janet, are you sure you won't come to Heidelberg with me? I have a nice corporate apartment in the historic part of the city. It would be wonderful to have you there." She shifted, resting comfortably against me. "Nope. I need to be with my mom. Besides, you need this time for yourself, Tom. You need to figure out who you want to be in your new life." I wasn't quite sure what she meant. "You need to explore while you're there. When you're not working, I think you should enjoy life. I know who I am and what I want. I like myself and my choices. I enjoy the freedom of waking up and deciding where to go without answering to anyone. I was married for 10 years and liked about 7 of those years. I don't know if I want to go through that again. You, on the other hand, were married for 25 years, and I can see you miss it. You would jump at the chance to marry again because you like being committed. Tom, go and have your adventure. I'll be here when you return, but I want to be honest with you. I need to stay close to my mom. A year can be long, and I don't want you to feel undue pressure. Do you remember when we talked about Pam and her first husband's arrangement? I nodded carefully. Her cousin Pam and her first husband made an agreement to allow each other freedom while he was away. Pam believed it was just a way to manage their needs while apart. Good, then you understand what I mean. I want you to enjoy yourself without concerns lingering in the background. I'm trying to be straightforward here. I sometimes find myself grappling with those feelings. Before we became serious, I had someone I would see occasionally. It was just a way to feel connected. So, do you see what I'm saying? It struck me that she might want some space while I was away. We had been exclusive for a couple of years, and my trip to Germany would change everything. I thought about it for a moment. Janet, I don't think it will be a problem. I know you're not the type to be with just anyone. You value your freedom and independence, which has been good for us. I'm curious if you do, but don't feel that you have to share all the details. It's all fine. I was starting to feel more at home in California, but couldn't shake the memory of that other woman who had been in my thoughts just the night before. 3 days later, I was on a Lufthansa flight to Frankfurt, Germany. Omega had already sent a box of my things, so I didn't have to pack too much. I did have one special wish, and Omega took care of it. A brand new S65 coupe with 621 horsepower would be waiting for me, perfect for my new adventure. After 11 hours, I arrived and stepped into a new chapter of my life. The car wasn't in Heidelberg as I expected. Instead, a young woman with a sign that read Tom Davis was waiting for me. Her name was Mildred Onstadt, and I would soon discover that she would be with me a lot. She had a nice fragrance, and her English was excellent, while my German was quite poor. I had done some studying with a language program, but I knew I'd need more practice. Mildred helped me into a shiny BMW, and we drove south to Heidelberg. She navigated traffic expertly, making the ride feel quick. When we reached the apartment building where I would stay, she was out of the car and at the door before I could get my seatbelt off. Come on, Herr Davis. Your apartment is on the second floor, and I believe your things were delivered this morning. She headed up the stairs, and I followed closely. As we entered my apartment, a petite German woman stood inside with her hands behind her back and a friendly smile. This is Frau Helga Schmidt. She will take care of housekeeping and cooking for you. You'll need to discuss your schedule with her, and I think you'll enjoy her cooking. We shook hands, and I liked her right away. Mildred showed me around the spacious apartment and pointed out the car keys hanging on the wall. The car was parked in 2B, pearl white with a red interior. The apartment had 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms with a full-size American fridge, which is hard to find in Germany. It was much bigger than the average German apartment, and I looked forward to living there. Mildred, Helga, and I sat down to plan out a schedule for cleaning and cooking. When we finished, both women took their leave for the evening. I had left San Francisco at 11 p.m. on Wednesday, and now it was midnight on Thursday, local time. Helga had made some sandwiches filled with pastrami, cheese, lettuce, and tomato. There was also a bottle of rum, a liter of Coke, and what looked like a case of half-liter bottles of beer. Someone had shared my tastes with my hosts, and it seemed like I would have a great time. If I had one complaint about the apartment, it was the annoying noise of the door alarm. It wasn't a bell. It was just a harsh buzzing sound. I answered it at exactly 7:30 a.m., and Mildred was there with 2 cups of coffee. I had been up for 3 hours already, unable to sleep well. My suit was neat, my shoes were shining, and I looked like a well-dressed businessman. Bill had warned me about their customs and what to expect in a new company. Mr. Davis, we need to leave now. Your first meeting starts at 8 a.m., and Herr Honerlecht does not like waiting, she said. She drove me quickly in her BMW to a plain old office building about 15 minutes away. The place was tidy, with workers in neat cubicles arranged in rows down a large central room. There were 2 floors with executive offices on the 3rd floor. It felt different from what I was used to back in California. The offices at Omega had an open design without assigned spaces. Everyone worked in shared areas, and there were breakout rooms scattered throughout. People relaxed and wore casual clothes like jeans and sneakers. Heidelberg was quite different from that. Mildred took me upstairs to the third floor and led me to a small, simply furnished office. She excused herself, saying that Herr Honorlecht would call for me soon. As expected, right at 8 a.m. my phone rang and I knew it was time to go in. Mildred brought me into the large CEO office where a plump man in his late 50s was busy reading some reports. He pointed to one of the big chairs in front of his desk, so I sat down. "Mildred, that will be all for now, thank you," he said to her. But I had grown used to having her around, so I invited her to stay beside me. Since he spoke in English, I continued. "Mr. Honorlecht, I would like to keep Mildred with me from now on. I think she has done an excellent job managing all the arrangements." I noticed a small smile on Mildred's face. "If you prefer, Mr. Davis, until we can find someone else," he replied. "Honorlecht, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Miss Onstadt will be my personal assistant now. I'll discuss more details with HR later today. But I don't have you meeting with the personnel office until tomorrow afternoon." I looked directly at him. Bill had already informed me about the situation. "I'm going to have Mildred give me a tour of the facilities and introduce me to the staff this morning. I also want to have a staff meeting at 1 p.m. in the best conference room you have. Mildred, will I need an interpreter?" She shook her head to say no. "Great. Let's go meet everyone," I said as I stood up. That's how I began shaping the new Omega offices in Heidelberg, Germany. Mildred showed me around the building and I met everyone who was working that day. After a light lunch, I took charge at the 1 p.m. staff meeting. First, I want everyone to use first names. I've been called Tom since I was little, and that's what I prefer. Second, Mr. Honorlecht has retired effective today, and I will be taking on that role for the next few months. Third, Mildred is now my executive assistant and will handle all non-capital spending approvals. We'll work on making processes smoother in the weeks to come because I don't want delays for small purchases. Lastly, let's bring out the snacks and drinks I had delivered and get to know each other. And that's exactly what we did. I aimed to break down barriers in the German office culture and began organizing the team similar to how I had done with my previous business. Hans, my HR guy, really enjoyed his beer and needed a ride home. Ingrid, the tech supervisor, became very friendly after a couple of glasses of wine. By the end of the day, we were all relaxed and ready to wrap things up. Mildred was a great support. She drove me back to my apartment in her car and helped me upstairs, though I could have managed on my own. It seemed like she appreciated the camaraderie. She was 35 and had never been married, so she didn't have anyone waiting for her at home. Helga had prepared a wonderful dinner, and I invited her to eat with Mildred and me. She made sauerbraten with all the sides, and I ended up having 2 servings for the first time in a long while. I could tell I was going to finish quickly, and soon enough I did, but both girls had already enjoyed themselves by that point. I got us all a drink, and about 30 minutes later we were at it again. Eventually, it was morning, and I was grateful it was a Saturday. Tammy had given me a memorable experience, one of the best in a long time. By the time the girls had breakfast and left, I had both their phone numbers and addresses, along with a promise for a future meeting. I felt pretty good about myself and decided to light a cigar. Helga wouldn't be in that day. I only saw her on weekdays unless something special happened. I hadn't even thought about Janet until now. 2 weeks in, and I was already thinking oddly. I wondered if she had already moved on too. Oddly enough, I didn't feel guilty or jealous. It was 6 weeks before I came back to the States. I didn't call ahead or tell anyone my travel plans. I just showed up. I knocked on Anne's door, and Helen answered. "Oh, my God." "Oh, no," she said when she saw me. "Well, hello to you too, Helen," I replied. As I walked in, I noticed a man sitting on the couch in the living room. He was just a man there with Helen, and Anne clearly wasn't home. I shouldn't have cared, but for some reason I did. "I'm sorry, Helen. I didn't mean to interrupt. Please tell Anne I'll call her later," I said, turning to leave. I heard a small voice say, "Please, Tom, you don't have to go." Being a bit childish at that moment, I said, "It's best," and left. I drove for about 5 minutes before I pulled over and tried to figure out why I was upset. They weren't doing anything wrong. Everything seemed fine. I should have just introduced myself as Anne's father and left it at that. I pulled out my phone and called Anne's home number. She picked up on the second ring. Oh, Tom, I'm so glad you called. Helen, I'm sorry. I should not have left like that. I should have introduced myself properly and not reacted the way I did. Are you coming back? She asked. Helen, you have company, and you've always been a kind host. I couldn't interrupt your time together. Maybe another time, okay? Tom, it isn't what you think. Helen, it's fine, really. Listen, Tom, the person here is a real estate agent showing me a couple of properties. Anne asked me to move out here. Now I felt foolish. So come back and let's have lunch. I'm starving, and we're done here for now. Helen, I'm sorry. I jumped to conclusions, and I should have known better. I'll be there soon. I waited for the businessman to leave and returned to Anne's place about 15 minutes later. Helen welcomed me with a warm hug and a light gesture of affection. She leaned in and spoke softly to me. Tom, did you think I was going to be with him? Helen, it's a normal thing to consider. Tom, that will never happen with anyone else, I promise. We shared a moment of silence, then I suggested we grab lunch. We went back to the cafe where I had first introduced her to Pam and Nigel. We talked about our kids and what was happening in her life. I decided not to bring up Tammy and Sarah. It didn't seem important. When we got back to my apartment, we each had a drink. Before I left, we made plans for dinner the following Friday. Later that night, I found myself in the company of Janet, who was looking lovely. I didn't ask why she had taken extra care. I just enjoyed the moment. While I had mentioned Tammy before, I realized they were quite different. To me, Janet was the best partner, even better than Helen in our younger days. Of course, those thoughts were something I kept to myself. Afterward, we shared a close moment, and she playfully nudged me. I have something to share, she said. I indulged in something a couple of weeks ago. You really don't have to tell me, I replied. I know, but I want you to know. Maybe I even like sharing it with you. She smiled as she said it. I was careful. I went to a place in Napa with an old friend of Pam's. He was just a fun distraction, nothing more. I couldn't help but laugh. I then shared my own little adventure with the two English ladies without going into too much detail. Janet was curious, but I remained discreet. A gentleman keeps some things to himself. We ended up being close again that night. In the morning, I mentioned my date with Helen. To my surprise, Janet seemed a bit quiet about it. Tom, that woman cares for you deeply. If she ever tries to win your heart back, I wonder how she would feel about what we have here. What will you think? Janet, until I was with those two English ladies, I had been completely faithful. You are the only woman I've been with besides Helen since before we married. I've never felt the need to be with many women. One has always been enough for me. Did I enjoy my time with the two girls? Absolutely. But that wasn't a real relationship. We were far apart, making our own special arrangements. Isn't that what you told me your cousin Pam called it? The arrangement? Yeah, that was Pam's thing with her first husband, Bob. Janet, I don't feel bad about this, and I still don't. But honestly, if those two girls were free tonight, there's no way I'd be with either of them. I'm here with you. That's just how I feel. And I wouldn't want to see another guy be with you when I know you're here for me. I guess I'm not really answering your question, am I? Tom, no, you aren't. But let me tell you something. I talk with Helen a lot. We've become friends. I don't know if that bothers you. If it does, you need to tell me. She knows we're seeing each other, but she also knows I'm not planning to marry you for the reasons we've discussed. Oh, forget it. I just need to say it. She is really interested in being with someone, and the only person she wants is you. She had moved closer and was speaking softly to me. Tom, Helen knows there's no competition between us. We have a good thing, with or without her around. So if I ask, will you? I understood what she was implying, but I didn't promise anything. I wasn't sure if I wanted to be with Helen again. She might want it, but did I? I felt a little jealous when I saw that real estate guy with her, but was I ready to get involved with her again? And where would that lead? I realized I was being set up. All three women, Helen, Janet, and Anne, were trying to connect me with them. When I arrived to pick up Helen that Friday evening, I knew something was up. Anne was there with a big smile. They had been shopping and enjoying each other's company. Helen's outfit was striking. I recognized that dress, and since Janet and Helen were similar in size, it confirmed my suspicions. Things were a bit awkward for a while. I understood the situation, and I was nervous about what might happen. We went to a cozy Italian restaurant in San Rafael instead of driving farther out. For the most part, our conversation flowed as usual, but this time I couldn't help but think about Janet. After dinner, we went to a nice jazz bar just a short walk away and settled into a corner table. Helen looked lovely in the soft light, and she seemed to enjoy the atmosphere. I noticed how her dress moved gently, which was a little distracting. As we left, we wandered among the shops and stopped at a crystal gift store. It wasn't open at that time, but we could see the items inside from the window displays. I noticed something I recognized. It was a set of deer around a clear pond. We had something similar at home. To be honest, I still have it. Helen left it behind when she moved on. Helen, you can take that back if you want. I still have it at my place. Tom, I might really like that. I saw a tear on her cheek when she looked away. She turned back and asked, "Can we go get it now tonight?" I'm not usually slow to catch on, but I nodded and said yes. As soon as I said it, I realized I was making a promise. It would be too late for her to go back to San Rafael from Sonoma, so she would stay with me and I would be driving her home. I drove carefully and my car handled the roads well. Helen seemed lost in her own happy thoughts as I guided the car into the garage. When we got inside, I turned on the gas fireplace and dimmed the lights. To my surprise, there was a bottle of cold wine and 2 glasses on the counter, and I hadn't placed them there. I poured us each a glass, and we relaxed for a moment. Tom, I can't wait any longer. You've brought me home. Now let's go into the bedroom. With that, she stood up and gently removed her dress. There stood my ex-wife in just her lavender underwear and dark blue heels, wearing pearls and matching earrings. She walked to the counter with her wine glass, picked up the bottle, and headed toward my bedroom, glancing back at me. I have to be honest with myself. I wanted to be with Helen in a deep and emotional way. I had those thoughts, but I stayed true to my feelings. Instead, we shared a loving moment. It was personal, a deep connection between 2 people. I approached her gently, and as our feelings for each other grew, everything became more intense. Even then, it was about love. We didn't rush through the night. We shared one meaningful moment and then fell asleep until morning. The sunlight was streaming through the window when I woke up. Helen was already up, and I could smell breakfast cooking. I showered and got dressed before heading to the kitchen. "Good morning, Tom. I hope you like what I'm making. It's mostly what you had in the fridge." I nodded and tried to make small talk, but it felt a bit awkward. Helen set the table for us, and we both enjoyed the meal and each other's company. When we finished, she spoke first. "Tom, before you say anything, what you did for me last night was the nicest thing anyone has done for me in years. When I told you that you were the only man I would ever love, I meant it. There can't be anyone else for me ever. Now, I know you have a good relationship with Janet. She is the one who set this up. What I'm trying to say is I'd like to do this again sometimes. Janet has said the same thing, even though I'm not sure why. She is good for you." Well, she was being honest. She wanted it, and Janet wanted it too. But did I want it? I liked what I had with Janet and didn't want it to end unless we both agreed. I didn't get a different feeling from her. Comparing the two was hard. With Janet, we shared a strong connection. With Helen, it felt deeper and more meaningful. I couldn't explain it fully, but there was something special. "Helen, I'm just going to take this slowly, okay? We had a moment, and I'm not sorry for it. I enjoyed it as much as you did. Will we have another evening out? I think we will. What I mean is, let's not promise each other anything. Let's just enjoy the time we've spent together and see where it goes. I have to head back to Germany in a couple of days. You are moving into a new place. We both have a lot going on, and we don't know what the future holds." Helen looked at me with a mix of worry and gratitude. I didn't shut her down, and I didn't rush us back together. Instead, we found a friendly understanding, which is what we needed. We cleaned up, and I carefully wrapped up the crystal figurine set for Helen before driving her back to Anne's. Before I left, I embraced her warmly. "As expected," she whispered, "I will always cherish you, Tom Davis, always." That night, I went back to Janet. She seemed eager, almost more than usual. Perhaps it was the fact that I had spent time with Helen the night before. She was persistent, and even in the morning, she was cheerful and lively. "I'm thinking about coming to Germany. Would you mind?" This was good news. I much preferred her to anyone else. Not right away, but maybe in a couple of weeks or so. "Can you hold it in for that long?" I laughed at the funny look on her face. "Of course, but I've told you about Mildred, right?" "Who's that?" she asked. "She works for me and she's a lovely woman," I replied with a chuckle. That earned me a couple of couch pillows thrown my way, but I couldn't help but think kindly of Mildred. The next day, I contacted Jason and Anne to talk about Softtech's progress and to set up a meeting for that afternoon at Omega. They both arrived on time, and we gathered in one of the conference rooms. In the past 3 months, we had seen a big increase in orders thanks to our successful product line. I thought it was a bit early for offers, but there were 2 interested parties in the company. We had been operating for more than 2 years now, with strong orders and solid finances. The ownership was shared equally among the 3 of us, and our rules required a 2/3 agreement to begin any discussions about selling the company. On paper, the company was valued at around $3 million, which is impressive for a business of its age. However, I believed it was worth even more, and I shared that with them. Listen, this may seem like a lot of money, and it is, especially right now. But you have a very successful product range and a great plan to grow this business, I explained. If you choose to sell, I'll support your decision, but I hope you'll stay and keep building this company. That's not a guarantee for success, but it's a reasonable expectation given your skills. They thought it over for a bit before finally agreeing. I had another reason for wanting them to stay, though. I wanted them to grow into successful business owners, and that would take time. I knew there were many companies that would be interested in a well-established business like ours, and patience would be key. A couple of days later, I flew back to Germany, making the same plans as before. This time, I had a shiny white S65 waiting for me in the parking garage. I would gladly make that trip to Heidelberg again without thinking twice. It was beautiful. As before, Helga was at the apartment waiting for me, this time with a delicious meal of Wiener Schnitzel, fries, and gravy, along with a fresh case of Weissbier. I truly appreciated her hospitality. Mildred buzzed shortly after, and the 3 of us enjoyed the meal together. I had built a good connection with Mildred. I felt comfortable discussing anything about work or even personal matters. She had heard about my adventures with some local acquaintances from a few of the regulars, and this made her feel a bit more comfortable around me. I never really talked to her about her life, but it was hard to believe she wasn't in a relationship given how attractive she was. The next few weeks passed quickly. We formed a little lunch group with Mildred, Ingrid, and me. We often enjoyed light meals like salads, paired with a glass of wine, usually at one of a few nearby places. One Friday, we ended up leaving work later than planned and went to a tavern under Mildred's apartment. It didn't take long for us to realize we weren't going back to the office that day. The 3 of us, along with another couple that Mildred knew, started having shots of tequila. It's not a typical drink in Germany, except for some college students. Mildred had learned to enjoy it during her college years, and Ingrid had experienced it during trips to Cancun. I don't usually drink heavily. I started to feel the effects when I noticed Ingrid getting playful. I remembered people like her from college. They were proper when sober, but quite different after a few drinks. Mildred simply smiled knowingly. I suppose I reacted like anyone would, so I ordered another round. We were all having a good time. It had been a while since I had enjoyed a night out so much that the details were a bit fuzzy. I vaguely remembered climbing some stairs with a woman on each arm, but not much after that. The next morning, I woke up in someone else's bed. I was surprised to find one woman lying on top of me and another draped across my head. I took in my surroundings and realized I had a lot to figure out. It didn't take long before the reality of where I was hit me. I tried to piece together how the night unfolded while keeping calm about my situation. After about 10 minutes, I groaned, feeling a rush of pleasure. She enjoyed every moment and held on until I relaxed. Then she smiled and looked at me. "Good day, Tom," Ingrid said with a charming smile. "That was a lovely night," she sighed. I could only smile back after what had just happened. Mildred was waking up, and as she moved, she inadvertently ended up quite close to me. When she realized it, it was a funny moment. "Oh my gosh," she exclaimed, quickly turning away. "I can't believe I did that." "Oh yes, you definitely can," I laughed heartily. "You can explain later, but for now, we need to clean up and find something to eat. I'm so hungry." We managed to untangle ourselves, and I found myself standing there with 2 women who had just shared a deeply personal morning with me. We would definitely need to talk later. In Mildred's apartment, I headed for the shower. I hadn't been in long when Mildred joined me. I'm sorry, Tom. I didn't mean for us to end up like this. It just happened. Mildred, don't worry, we're all adults here. I gently touched the top of her head and began to wash her back. After we were done, Ingrid showered, and later we all sat together in the kitchen. Ladies, I don't remember everything, but I do recall parts of the night. I think we all connected. They exchanged glances and burst into laughter. Yes, they said together. All right, about work, can we agree to keep this quiet? It could cause problems, I suggested. Tom, don't stress. Ingrid and I are discreet. In Europe, things are a bit different. Office relationships happen. Besides, a few of our friends knew we took you upstairs. You'll be quite the talk when you come back, said Mildred. Both ladies leaned in to offer a friendly gesture, and I joined them for a meal. True to their word, no one mentioned what happened. If anyone at the office knew, they kept it to themselves. The only sign was a small smile from Margaret one morning when someone talked about visiting the same place we did. 3 weeks later, Janet called me at 3 a.m. Hey, how are you? She asked. Janet, I'm doing great. I was just finishing up a round of golf. Do you know what time it is? Yeah, it's 9 a.m. there, right? Actually, no. I'm 9 hours ahead of you, not behind. It was 3 a.m. She laughed at that. You aren't upset with me, are you? I told her I wasn't, and that was true. It was nice to hear from her. She called to tell me she was flying in a couple of days. I asked her to send me her flight details so I could make plans. When I saw her arrival time in Frankfurt, I realized I had a meeting at work, so I asked Mildred to pick her up when she arrived. Mildred knew about Janet and the arrangement we had when we were apart. She often teased me about it, saying it was very European. After one evening together that I barely remembered, she suggested we could spend more time together, this time when we were both sober. She wanted to connect in a deeper way, and we did that about a week before Janet's late-night call. It was everything I hoped for and more. When Janet called, I felt a bit worried, but Mildred said we should keep things private, so that's what we agreed to do. Mildred left to pick up Janet around 3 p.m. while I was stuck in long meetings with a client that kept running over time. We eventually took a break and rescheduled for dinner. Ingrid made the dinner plans and we headed out around 6 p.m. I called Mildred to let her know, but she had just reached the airport. She told me not to worry and said she would keep Janet company. Ingrid and I had dinner, concluded a deal, and then it was time to end the night. I dropped her off at her place, and she insisted I come in for a drink. I knew where that might lead, and as nice as it sounded, tonight wasn't the night for that. I made my excuses, and she understood. I had company arriving. I drove home and parked the car. When I walked upstairs, I found a note saying they were down at the tavern and to join them when I got back, no matter how late. I took a shower, changed into some jeans and a sweater, quickly shaved, and headed downstairs. The tavern was lively that night. I could hear the noise as I approached. The university exams had just ended and the bars were packed. I walked in to find a full house. It felt like a big celebration. I didn't see Mildred and Janet right away, so I found a nice spot at the bar by the door for a good view. The younger crowd was enjoying themselves, covered in laughter and plenty of drinks. There were sure to be some happy faces that night. Then I spotted them at a long booth across the room. It could fit about 12 people if they squished together. Mildred was sitting between two young men, and Janet was flanked by a guy on each side. I was surprised to see Helen caught in the middle of two of her admirers, and they were all having a great time. Each of the girls had arms around them, and they were taking shots. That was unusual for Helen since she usually didn't drink much, but there she was, finishing off a strong drink. The guys were getting a bit too close. One guy had his hand resting on Janet's side, even through her shirt. Although it didn't seem right, Janet looked like she was enjoying the attention. Helen, on the other hand, was clearly quite tipsy, possibly unaware of how much they were leaning on her. I decided to watch for a little longer to see what would happen, but then one of the guys leaned into Helen. I could see her surprise when it happened, but she didn't pull away. "Tom, it looks like you had quite the evening," she said, her eyes sparkling with amusement. I smiled in response, reflecting on the night's events. "Yeah, just a typical night out, I guess," I replied, trying to downplay the chaos. We shared a quiet laugh, the kind that bonds friends amidst the remnants of a lively atmosphere. Janet returned, her enthusiasm still somewhat evident despite her weariness. "I can't believe I got tipsy so quickly." Just part of the fun, Mildred replied playfully. You never know what can happen when you're out. The three of us exchanged stories from the night. The atmosphere was filled with light-hearted banter, and I felt a deep sense of camaraderie. Eventually, Janet made her way to the spare room, her head swimming from the evening's adventures. Mildred leaned closer to me, her tone softening. You really handled the situation well, Tom. It's nice to have someone looking out for everyone. I nodded, appreciating her sentiment. Thanks, Mildred. It's important for us to look out for one another. As the night wore on, we settled into a more relaxed conversation, recalling moments that made us laugh and reflecting on friendships forged through spontaneity and shared experiences. The room was filled with warmth and connection, a reminder of the joy found in simple moments together. Tom, you never mentioned you had two ladies here. I didn't know they'd both come. That's fine. For tonight, they still aren't really here, she said, nodding toward my bedroom, then taking my hand. She stood at the doorway, playfully beckoning me before going inside, leaving the door ajar. I paused, considering whether to return to my snoring ex-wife or my friend, before deciding to follow Mildred into my room. When I woke up at 6 a.m., Mildred was gone. It was time to work, and by 7:30 I had left the apartment. I left a note on the table for Janet and Helen. It was surprising to see Helen with Janet, and I would have appreciated a heads up, but I guessed the surprise was planned. The night before was the first time I had seen Helen drink shots. Back when we were younger, she usually stuck to wine or maybe a beer. Hard liquor was rare, only in mixed drinks. If she had been sober, there would have been no way those young men would have dared to get too close. Looking back, I found it quite amusing. Mildred later told me that she had asked Hans and Dietrich, the bartender, to keep an eye on things, and that she was the one who started the round of drinks at the urging of the young men. They were clearly just looking for fun. Mildred was simply hoping for some entertainment from two tipsy American women who couldn't handle their drinks. Anyway, I left my two visitors with local maps and a spare key. I had my business to run. Mildred was all business when she arrived, showing no signs of the previous night's fun. These Germans were quite different. Even Ingrid, who could be playful, took her work seriously. Later that afternoon, I received a call from my friend David Stone. He and his team had arrived in Mannheim a few days earlier and wanted to invite me and any guests to a weekend retreat near the small town of Hedesbach. It was a quiet community not far from Mannheim-Heidelberg that Mildred remembered from her youth. I happily accepted and told him I would be bringing 3 guests. Everything was arranged. When I got home that evening, Helga had prepared a lovely meal and set the table for us all. I asked her to join us, and she graciously accepted. It's not common in European customs for hired help to sit at the table, but I had decided from the start to break that tradition. Initially, she was unsure how to respond, but after a couple of glasses of wine, she began to relax. Janet, Helen, you both look a lot more awake than last night, I said. Thank you, Tom. I only remember a little of the night, so if something exciting happened, you'll have to fill us in, Janet said with a smile. Helen just shyly glanced around the table. I don't even remember how I got here, she admitted. And maybe that's just fine, I replied. Helga just smiled and stayed quiet. I later learned that when she arrived, both women were still asleep in their rooms. Afterward, they walked out looking a bit disheveled and caught sight of each other, leading to a fit of laughter. I wasn't sure how their day went, but they must have left around 10 a.m. and returned right before I got home from work. After dinner, when Helga left, the 3 of us settled into the living room. So, ladies, how did you decide to travel together? I asked. I had been thinking about this all day. Janet approached me directly. Tom, I didn't want to travel alone, and since Helen didn't have any plans, I asked her to join me and see the sights of Europe. She really seemed serious when she said this. Besides, your place is quite spacious, and it's no trouble at all. Helen was sitting quietly, legs crossed, enjoying a glass of wine with a slight smile. I wasn't going to argue because honestly I didn't mind. I just hoped I wouldn't feel awkward later with my former wife around. Just then, the doorbell rang, and Janet jumped up to answer it. That's Mildred. She and I are going out. I'm not sure when I'll be back, so don't wait up. She chuckled. Mildred stood at the door with a big smile, which she had been showing more often. Before you go, I should tell you that we're all headed out this weekend after work. Mildred, too. We got invited by David Stone and his team to a retreat in Hedesbach, so take it easy this time." With that, they laughed and left together. This left Helen and me alone. She came over, sat next to me, and spoke softly. "Tom, I hope you're not upset that I came with Janet. She really wanted me to join, but I could have said no." "Helen, I'm not upset, just surprised. How are the kids?" We talked for a while, catching up on family news, and then I suggested we take a walk in the neighborhood. The old city of Heidelberg is a beautiful example of historical architecture. Though it suffered damage in Wood II, much of the old city has been restored. The castle remains a ruin, but it still has its own charm, especially at night. We strolled together, enjoying the sights before stopping at a cozy cafe for some drinks. "Helen, this is what I always wanted for us after the kids grew up, to walk around Europe, enjoy ourselves, and live life freely." "I know, Tom, and I messed up, didn't I?" she said with a light laugh. "Yes, but I made my mistakes too. We don't need to focus on that. I don't hold any hard feelings toward you. We've shared good times." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace with our relationship, which had become more friendly lately. Even with everything that had happened, I felt good about how we were getting along. Looking at Helen, I recognized her as my close friend since we were young, and I felt a mix of regret and understanding about our past. But I wasn't sure how to move forward from there. I had just spent time with Mildred the night before, and I knew I would be close to Janet soon, if not tonight, then definitely over the weekend. The issue was that this wasn't truly who I am. I had talked about it with Janet, and Helen already knew. I prefer being in a committed relationship. Being single meant I didn't have to worry about being exclusive, especially considering the understanding Janet and I had during our long breaks apart. Mildred was a result of that understanding, and I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy being with her. Honestly, if my situation were different, I might even find myself developing feelings for her. I was certainly captivated by her. Ingrid and a few others were just brief distractions. I barely remembered my time with Ingrid, but she was skilled in her own way. Those distractions didn't matter now. No matter what, Helen would always be my idea of true beauty. Janet was exciting, and Mildred was charming and captivating. As for me, I was a healthy, successful businessman nearing 50, trying to avoid making tough choices. When I did need to choose, I often felt lost. For now, I turned to Helen, my former wife. "Helen, let's head home." We walked back to the apartment, her arm linked with mine, passing by the tavern. I asked her to wait a moment while I went inside to settle things with Dietrich. I handed him 100 euros and noticed Mildred and Janet chatting animatedly with a cheerful German couple and 3 men. I didn't catch her attention, but just as I turned to leave, I saw her wink at me with that playful smile again. That night, Helen slept beside me, but we didn't share an intimate moment. We just lay together, talking softly into the night. We were both tired, and it felt nice to simply be together without any pressure. I don't know when we fell asleep, but I woke up alone at 6 a.m. as usual. Later in the day, the 4 of us, Helen, Janet, Mildred, and I, drove to the retreat estate in Hedesbach, where we were welcomed warmly by David and his wife, Marilyn. Along with the Stones, we met Kira Wilson and Millicent Etheridge, 2 members of David's team who were working on their project. 3 more team members would arrive later. Millicent was a tall and stunning woman with beautiful golden hair, while Kira, a younger woman with dark hair and tattoos, had her own unique charm. They were often seen together, supporting each other. Mildred quickly liked both of them, and they walked away down the long halls of the large house. I introduced Helen to David and his wife, and along with Janet, the 3 ladies went in another direction, leaving David and me to chat. "3 women, Tom?" he chuckled. "I only started with 1, I replied with a wink. "Yes, I know. I've been there too." Janet had told me once that David and Marilyn had a colorful past that was both interesting and dramatic. She didn't share many details, and I didn't want to ask. I did know that Pam and David had been close for a while, but that was all. Still, they were all good friends, and Pam was considered family. I planned to ask David about it over drinks one night. We gathered for dinner in a beautiful room and enjoyed a big feast. By the time we finished, everyone was relaxed and having a good time. The rest of David's team arrived, along with some guests from his new German branch. "Tom, are you doing okay tonight?" It was Marilyn, David's wife, who was standing next to me. She and Helen were getting along well, but she had taken a break from the two older German gentlemen who were trying to talk to them. "Come on, let's step out to the patio. I could use some fresh air," she suggested. So we went outside. I looked over at Helen. The two men were chatting with her and sharing drinks. I didn't know where Janet and Mildred had gone, but all of us were adults. "Tom, you've been divorced for a couple of years, right?" I nodded, feeling like it had been much longer. "Oh, that's probably a good sign. You still care for her, don't you? You don't have to answer, I can see it on your face." "Marilyn, of course, I still care for her. We were together for 25 years, you can't just turn that off." I smiled at the look on her face. "Oh, I completely understand that. Tom, David and I have been through what you're feeling. The divorce was tough, and even though I tried to end it, David found a way to hold on. It's hard to imagine, but my situation was quite complex." She wiped a tear from her eye, and I gently put my arm around her shoulder. "Marilyn, our stories aren't finished yet. Until they are, I never rule anything out. Just a few months ago, I thought my life was set with someone named Janet Carr. Now look at me with 3 women around. Life is quite the puzzle, isn't it?" We both laughed at the irony, and she told me to enjoy the moment while I could. I thought that was good advice. If it was good advice, I needed to remember it for both me and others. I walked around the party and saw Janet and Helen having fun with some German guys. They were friendly with each other, laughing and enjoying their drinks. Janet noticed me and politely excused herself to come over. "Are you feeling a little jealous, Tom?" she asked. "Does it show?" She chuckled softly. "Well, just a little. But I want to know, are you feeling this way for me or for Helen?" "Can it be both?" I replied. "Oh, that could be interesting. Since I'm feeling particularly cheerful tonight, are you planning to spend some time with me later? We haven't had a chance to catch up in weeks, and I could use some company." "I understand, Janet, but what about the guys? How will you let them down gently? And what about Helen? Is she feeling the same way?" "Oh, Tom," she said playfully, "Helen is only interested in you. She might enjoy their attention, but she wouldn't go any further. As long as she doesn't have too much to drink, that is. I'll be nice to them, but for now you should go enjoy yourself. I'll find you later, and who knows, I might have a little surprise for you." She smiled teasingly. She gave my arm a gentle touch, and I knew the evening was going to be interesting. Looking over at Helen, I saw she was deep in conversation with her admirers and barely noticed the drink Janet had slipped into her hand. Mildred was chatting away with her new friends, Millicent and Kira. They were talking with 2 young men who looked like recent college graduates. I later learned that was exactly right. They were new hires at Phoenix and had joined us as part of David's team. They seemed excited about their night. Mildred glanced my way before returning to her discussion. I wandered through the house. We had free range of this beautiful old home, which had 2 guest houses and an apartment above the garage. The owners, a friendly older couple, stayed in the garage apartment and were rarely seen. As I walked through one of the halls, I found a billiards room with a well-stocked bar. There were some drinks in the fridge. I set up the table to play a game when David came in. "Nice start. Do you play 9-ball?" he asked. "Of course, whenever I can," I replied. That was how the rest of my evening began. We started playing for a bit of money, 20 euros since we were in Europe. I think we both did okay, but I found that he was quite good, even better than me. As soon as we finished our last task, some of the ladies found us. Marilyn came in with Janet and Helen. The other girls were still engaged in games back in the study. I later learned that Millicent was happily married with 2 adorable little girls and a caring husband at home, so that was one less option for the 2 men interested in her. By midnight, the gathering broke up, and I excused myself to go to my room upstairs. After changing into something comfortable and taking a quick shower, I returned to my bedroom. The bright lights were replaced with soft candlelight on the side tables. Lying on my bed were 2 lovely ladies, each about the same size and obviously feeling relaxed, giggling together. They seemed cheerful and playful as we enjoyed each other's company late into the night. In the morning, I woke from a deep sleep to find Helen there, smiling. We exchanged looks, and she made me feel appreciated in a special way. Afterward, she settled in beside me as I drifted back to sleep. When I woke up again, I found the bed empty. The windows were open and sunlight poured in. I saw a familiar figure, her back to me, brushing her hair in the warm light. It was a view I had seen many times before. I started to say something, but she put her finger to her lips, signaling me to stop. "Don't say anything." "It just seemed right," she said softly. She then turned and walked to the closet, slipping on a light blue dress that was shorter than usual. Smiling, she headed out the door and down the hall. Later, I joined David and Marilyn for brunch on one of the patios. Janet, Helen, and Mildred had gone into the village for a big soccer tournament, leaving just the three of us and a couple of others who were still around. "Did you have a hard night, Tom?" Marilyn asked teasingly. "Part of it, yes," I replied, while David chuckled. "Well, there were certainly some happy faces here earlier," Marilyn added with a smile. "A gentleman never shares his secrets, my dear," David responded playfully. We enjoyed the brunch, and I took the friendly teasing in stride. Since the others would be gone for most of the day and possibly into the evening, the three of us decided to take a hike through the countryside using the many trails in the area. By the time we came back, it was dusk, and the others still hadn't returned. After a light dinner, David and I went back to the billiards room to continue our game from the night before. During a break, I started a new conversation. "So who has been trying to bring Helen and me back together? I think you might know something," I asked. He looked at me for a moment while sipping his favorite drink. "I believe it was all three of them, Marilyn, Pam, and Janet. From what I hear, Janet went to Pam for advice, as she usually does, and Marilyn was there too. The three of them talked, and you know how they can get carried away. They really think you still care about your wife or ex-wife and believe it's a good idea for them to help you two see what happens next." He chuckled at that. I told Marilyn to stay out of it, but it was like I was speaking to the stars. She didn't listen, and reminded me how Pam helped my own marriage. I couldn't argue that point, but asked her to keep me out of it. Still, I have enjoyed watching what's happened. My usually calm host laughed at this. "David, I figured something was up when Janet asked me to take Helen out a couple of times. The funny part is Janet and I have a great friendship. We're not going to marry, but we do enjoy each other. With both of them here, things have gotten quite complicated, and then there's Mildred, too." She adds another layer to the mix. "Tom, it's really simple. Janet is a lot like her cousin Pam. Whatever drew her to Helen might be what Pam saw in Marilyn. She's handling her own version of this complex situation. I hadn't acted on things with Marilyn yet, but I've been living my life, even though we both cared for each other deeply. I told Marilyn that you're different. You've already divorced, which changes everything." What David said made sense. Being divorced and living life on my own terms had indeed changed things. I still had feelings for Helen, but I also valued my current relationship. Over the last couple of months, my relationship with Janet had shifted. I realized I needed to talk to both of them to figure out what we were doing. "David, I'm going to enjoy my life, and right now that seems to involve 3 different women. If I end up with one of them or none at all, I'll deal with that later. For now, let's play." That's exactly what we did, and later Mildred joined us along with Marilyn. The others had stayed nearby and visited one of the local places. We ended up playing doubles and breaking even on our 20 € games. After we finished and settled down, Mildred and I stepped out onto a porch. We were both relaxed on a comfortable chair, enjoying the cool air. "Mildred, you've never explained why you haven't settled down with a husband and kids and everything that comes with that?" She glanced at me with a small smile. "Well, I have never met the right man for that. It's not that I didn't try. I stopped a few years ago. It wasn't hard to find men. The problem was that many of them were already committed. A long time ago, there was a man I might have married, but after a big disagreement, we ended our relationship. We were both young and stubborn. About 6 months later, I found out he was engaged to someone else. I confronted him, asking why he didn't try to fix things with us. He asked me the same question, and I had no good answer. So, he married her, and I felt a sense of loss for a long time. Now he has 3 beautiful children, but she divorced him a couple of years ago. Do you still have feelings for him?" "Tom, not in the same way. That's the thing about healing. The past feelings change, and what's left isn't the same. I think you know what I mean after your divorce. Do you still feel for her like you did before?" It was a tough question, but a fair one. I didn't know how to answer, so I stayed quiet. "Why did you stop looking for someone a few years ago?" She chuckled, knowing I was avoiding her question. "It's funny, really. I had a moment of clarity and discovered I enjoyed being single. I can come and go as I please. If I want a relationship for a while, I can have it. I can travel, eat out, play, and work hard without having to check with someone else's plans. That freedom feels good, so I decided to keep living this way until I find the right man. She was absent-mindedly touching my leg, but it felt like a friendly bond, so I let her continue. Do you still care for her like before your divorce? She wasn't letting me off easy. Mildred, honestly, I don't know. I was really upset with her for a long time, but that faded and now we're friends again. If I had to say, I'd say it's different now. We've both changed, but I do care for her and I always will. Will you always want to be with her? Maybe. I smiled. She moved a little closer, and after a while she invited me to her room. Janet and Helen had not come back yet, and I wanted to avoid any interruptions later. When I was with Mildred, everything felt warm and smooth. We were both excited, enjoying the soft light from 2 candles on the side table. She playfully bit my lip as I moved closer. I could feel her enthusiasm rise with each movement, and she was very expressive in her joy, which came with great intensity. It was a special moment, and I didn't think about anyone else. I was completely focused on this lovely woman beside me, feeling a strong connection. Her alarm went off at 5 a.m., and she quickly got up ready to start the day. My usual wake-up time was later, so I just groaned at her energy. Come on, Tom. Get up and run with me. It's a great time for it, she said. I decided to join her after grabbing my running clothes. We ran 7 kilometers around the village and some back roads before heading back to the retreat. As we returned, we saw Janet and Helen arriving home, looking tired and like they had been out all night. Maybe I should have gone with them, Mildred said. I hugged her closer. No, we're all adults. You don't need to watch over anyone. We enjoyed our time, didn't we? I tried to keep calm on the outside, but inside I was unsure. Could I really have all 3 of them? I pushed those thoughts aside for now. When we got back to her room, we shared a gentle moment before getting ready for the day and meeting others for breakfast. When I returned, Janet and Helen had fallen asleep together in my big bed. I didn't want to wake them, so I decided to go for a ride and invited Millicent and Kira to join me. Millicent wasn't feeling great, but Kira was eager to come along. We drove through some scenic back roads for 3 hours, stopping at different spots to take pictures and stretch. Finally, we parked outside a tavern and enjoyed a couple of drinks. Kira was quite an interesting young woman. She opened up a lot during our time together, and I learned about her close friendship with Millicent. They started working together, and she shared stories about Millicent's children and even mentioned how Millicent was married twice to the same man. She talked about her mother, expressing pride in how her mom managed to turn her life around and found a wonderful partner after struggling with her first marriage. I liked this young lady and saw a lot of potential in her. I understood why David relied on her so much at work. Although she was in her mid-20s, she had an air of maturity that made her seem older. So how do you manage having 3 women in your life? I would think you'd be really tired all the time. She smiled while saying it. I'd be just as tired with 1 as with 3, I answered, trying to keep the conversation light. Oh, then you must be really good at it, Kira said with a serious look. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I just laughed. I was just an average guy in good shape, not particularly special in that area, but I liked to be adventurous. Helen and Janet were fun, and Mildred offered a sense of freedom. Kira, I'm just a romantic at heart, I guess. Yeah, right, she joked, lightly punching my arm. So you didn't have a special night last night? I asked, half joking. She looked at me and stuck her tongue out playfully before laughing, which felt a bit guilty. You did, didn't you? I noticed she was actually blushing and shifting in her seat, like a teenager caught doing something sneaky. With a sly grin, she took the rest of her drink and downed it. We stayed a while longer, enjoying each other's company before heading back. Later that afternoon, Helen, Janet, Mildred, and I said our goodbyes and drove back to Heidelberg. It was a short, pleasant ride, with all the ladies in good spirits. Janet and Helen sat in the back, continuing their cheerful chatter while Mildred tested them on drinks and games from the front seat. I was surprised by how much Helen knew, especially about some of the more playful games. We returned home quickly, and after helping Mildred with her luggage, Janet, Helen, and I went to my apartment. After dinner, I patted the seats beside me and wrapped my arms around both of them. Okay, tell me what's happening. I said. They exchanged glances and laughed, as if my question was silly. Helen spoke first. Janet is going to spend some special time with you while I enjoy a cozy sleep in my comfy bed, she said, pointing toward her room. Janet chimed in, and after that, we'll rest, and in the morning, you'll head off to work. Helen and I are planning an adventure tomorrow, and we'll be away for a few days. I hope that's all right with you. Mildred can keep you company while we're away. Is that all right? I must have looked quite confused. Don't worry about it. We know about Mildred. She told us. Actually, she asked if we were okay with it, and of course we are. You should know that, Janet said. Helen added, Tom, all I want is for you to be happy and be yourself. Everything will work out, whether it's later or when we all get back home. With that, Helen leaned over and gave me a gentle gesture of affection before she headed to her room. Janet settled into my lap, wrapping her arms around my neck and shoulders. Finally, we're alone. It's about time. We cuddled on the couch for a while before I took her hand and led her into my room. We climbed into bed, feeling tired and content. After a while, we lay there, feeling too tired to even get up. Soon, we both fell asleep, holding each other close. We woke up around 2 a.m., got up for a quick break, then lay back down and talked for a bit. Tom, when we're together, I've never felt closer to anyone. I want it to keep going. You don't have to stop, Helen. You're the only one who can keep me close like this. And if you ever want to change anything, just let me know, okay? Oh, Tom, you sweet man, she laughed. I don't want you to stop being with Helen or even Mildred while you're here. I like Mildred. I wouldn't mind sharing a nice moment with her too, she said playfully. And I care about Helen like I do Pam or a sister. We both share something special, you. But do you know why I want you to be with her? It's because when you are together, it's beautiful. I know she told me about it. You give each other what you want. I think you and Mildred share something unique as well. I have to admit I'm a bit envious of that, and so is Helen. Janet, just stay here with me. I'm okay with everything. Let's go back to sleep. You have a busy morning. Just leave me your schedule so I can reach you if I need to. They left me their schedule for a 6-day trip through Germany and the Netherlands with a stop in Belgium. I felt a bit envious, but work was calling. Mildred was taking on more responsibilities, and I saw a lot of potential in her. I had a bit of a situation on my hands. There was no doubt that I was involved with Mildred. She stayed in my place every night while the other women were away on their trip. A few people at work probably knew about us. Ingrid, for sure, and I had a feeling Margarete did too. Hans and a few others might also be aware. If I promoted Mildred to a higher position, it could lead to complications. During my weekly call with my boss, Bill, he offered a possible solution. My operations manager back in Sonoma was expecting a baby and had decided not to come back to work full-time. This meant I needed to find someone to fill her role in about 5 months. Before I could offer this job to Mildred, I needed to talk to 2 other women. When I explained the situation, I was surprised by how excited they were about it. To give some background, my household had turned into a place where many people came and went. David and Marilyn had moved to Italy for work, leaving Millicent and Kira in Germany. Millicent traveled back and forth every 2 weeks, and Mildred had offered them her extra room. Millicent and Kira were very close friends, which caught me off guard a bit, but Mildred assured me they were not more than that. They shared nearly everything except Millicent's husband. Despite this, all the women were becoming good friends. In fact, Dietrich jokingly called them my group, which included all 5 women, and 6 when Ingrid was around. I made the job offer to Mildred, and she wanted some time to think about it. I was fine with that since we still had several months before any changes were needed. I took the time to explain that this was an important and challenging role and that I wasn't offering it due to our personal connection. I made sure the position would report to Bill to keep everything clear. He was on board once I discreetly explained the situation. Janet and Helen returned to the States after extending their stay for another 3 weeks. Janet was concerned about her mom, and Helen needed to finalize the purchase of a condo. This left me on my own again, though Mildred still spent time with me. The 2 ladies planned to come back in a month, so life in Germany continued in this way for the next few months. Janet and Helen visited a couple more times, and at one point, I flew back with Mildred to introduce her to the Omega team once she accepted the job. Around that time, Mildred and I had a serious talk about our relationship. I realized we couldn't keep things as they were and still have a healthy working relationship, especially back in the States. The only way that could work would be if we married, and neither of us wanted to go down that road. Human nature took care of our relationship situation. Mildred met a man during her training in Sonoma, and they began to spend time together. She shared her feelings with me from the start, and not long after, we had a heartfelt goodbye. It was touching and special. On one of our trips, we went to an Italian villa for a wonderful weekend together and returned to Germany as close friends, keeping that experience private. The man in her life knew about our friendship when their relationship began, but he didn't need to know the details of how we moved on to being just friends. Eventually, my time in Germany came to an end. I asked Margaret to take over at the office after a long evening of enjoying Riesling and discussing work matters. I figured if things didn't go well, I could find someone else. The office held a big farewell party for me and for Mildred since she was returning home with me. By the time I left, I had set up the Heidelberg office to reflect how we operated in our Sonoma office, and everyone seemed happy with the changes. We arrived late in the evening and were greeted by Mildred's new friend, a pleasant guy who managed a local winery. We said our goodbyes, and Mildred and her friend went one way while I headed to my condo. I had asked Anne to clean the place up, and she did an even better job by stocking it with fresh groceries and plenty of my favorite imported German beer. I had grown fond of it. It took a few days to get back into a routine, but one of the first things I wanted to do was take a short trip to relax. Janet knew I was back, but we hadn't seen each other yet. With that in mind, I walked over to her condo. I wasn't expecting another man to answer the door. When it opened, I caught a quick glimpse of Janet in her living room, and our eyes met in surprise. Even though I didn't have a claim on her, I felt a twinge of envy. I was back, and being reunited should have changed things, but I realized I wasn't the same person I used to be, and I shouldn't expect certainty from Janet. I decided to take the simpler route. I said I would talk to her later, excused myself, and took the keys to my Porsche. It was the middle of the afternoon, so I headed toward San Rafael and called Anne, hoping she and Jason would like to join me for dinner. She mentioned they already had plans with her mom. I awkwardly started to back out of the conversation, but she insisted, "Dad, we're going to Yet Wah, and you should come too." It was just the three of us, but now it will be 4. Besides, we haven't seen you much this past year, and we need to catch up. I almost said no, but she's my daughter, and she usually gets her way. I was also a bit happy that Helen was coming. This would be the first time our whole family sat down together in over 3 years. Plus, the Chinese restaurant we were going to is really good, and I didn't want to miss it, or so I told myself. Janet called me before I reached San Rafael, and I made sure everything was okay between us. We were still good, but I felt like I was searching for something, even if I wasn't sure what it was. After a nice drive, I arrived at Anne's place, and we talked about the business. I had wanted to chat with them for a while. Softtech was growing quickly, but some companies in biotech were holding back and waiting for new regulations from the FDA. Biotech was very important for our company, and I worried we were too focused on it. I wanted to move into general manufacturing and make a stronger presence in the tech sector nearby. Jason came over later at Anne's request, and we had an informal meeting. The kids knew a lot about biotech. They understood what customers needed from the equipment and software they provided. Breaking into other business areas felt a bit uncomfortable, but I needed to encourage them to be more adventurous. Listen, we've been at this for 3 years. Our products are well regarded and we need to keep pushing forward. To grow, we can either develop new products or expand our market reach with what we have. I think we can do both. Anne, we need to be bolder in our markets, and Jason, it's time to get back into product development. That means you'll need someone to manage production. Just my thoughts. You both know best how to run things. They looked at me as if I was nudging them to take a leap. Maybe I was. They had become comfortable watching things unfold and didn't see the challenges ahead. It was time for them to start moving. They didn't realize it at the moment, but later they agreed, and Softtech hired a new production manager and secured several new contracts for upgrading light manufacturing operations along the West Coast. After we finished talking, we headed to dinner and met Helen at the restaurant. She didn't know I was coming, which surprised both of us. She was with another man when we arrived, and he wasn't the real estate guy. If I felt a twinge of jealousy earlier when I saw Janet, it was stronger now. Helen wore a lovely yellow dress that looked fantastic on her. Her hair looked nice, and she wore a scent I used to like. They sat at the table we were about to join. Helen had a worried look on her face, and I knew mine showed my sadness, even though I tried to hide it. She could always see how I really felt. I leaned in and whispered to Anne, "Did you know she was supposed to meet someone?" Anne shook her head just a little. Helen introduced everyone, and it was a bit awkward. The man was someone who lived in her condo building. I caught Helen's eye and felt the hurt in mine. I knew I needed to do something. I spoke softly to everyone. "Hey, I think I'll step outside for a bit. I shouldn't have said yes on such short notice, and it's not right for me to interrupt." I looked at Anne and Jason and told them I would call later. I wanted to be polite while also leaving this uncomfortable situation. They didn't want me to go, but I could see Anne understood. As I left, she mouthed, "I'm sorry. I love you." The problem was, I had come with Jason and Anne, and now I stood outside the restaurant wondering what to do next. I lingered there for several minutes. "Can we go for a walk?" Anne asked. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes and took my arm. We walked along the sidewalk. "Anne, no need to cry." "I can handle this," I said, trying to reassure her. She held on to me tighter. "She cares about you so much. She's feeling a mix of emotions right now, and he doesn't know how to help. Jason is trying to keep things calm, but you need to talk to her. She didn't expect you to be here. Please, just talk to her." Anne, she looked dressed up to impress someone, not to have dinner with family. I was the one who helped her pick that dress. I wanted to see her in it, she insisted. I looked at my daughter and believed her. "Okay," I replied. We turned around and walked back to the restaurant. I sat on a bench near the entrance, waiting. Soon the man approached me. "Mr. Davis, I'm sorry for the confusion tonight. I wouldn't have joined Helen if I had known how she felt or that you would be here. It was just dinner. Please accept my apology." He extended his hand, and I shook it. "It's all right. I might have done the same if the roles were reversed," I said. After he left, I stayed on the bench. Helen came over and sat beside me. She looked directly into my eyes. "Tom, when are you going to come back to me? When will you say I'm yours again? We both know you will at some point. I just need to know when. Am I asking too much?" She wasn't crying anymore. She was smiling, and I hugged her gently, asking, "Where do you want to go?" "Home," she replied. "Maybe, but let's eat first," I suggested. I stood up and spoke with the restaurant staff, sharing our story kindly. They agreed to move us to a quieter spot, and we enjoyed a lovely meal together as a family for the first time in over 3 years. Before we left, I made sure to give a nice tip to the waiter and the manager for their kindness. When we arrived at Anne's, I explained to Anne and Jason what I was doing, and we said our goodbyes. I drove toward Helen's home, following her directions. Once we got to her place, I turned her gently and helped her out of her dress. We shared a moment on her new couch. That night, I felt a strong desire for closeness. We connected in a way that felt meaningful, and when we were finished, I knew I had shared an intense experience with Helen, someone who had once left me. As we settled down to sleep, she rested her hand on my chest, with her leg draped over mine. The next morning, I got up and made her breakfast. After we ate, I told her we were going on a trip, a little vacation before I returned to my busy job back in the States. We packed her 2 bags into the car and headed toward Sonoma. Once we arrived, I carried both bags inside and told her to take only one for now. If we needed anything else, we would buy it. I did the same, getting only what I needed. Helen seemed a bit tired from our previous night together. I wanted to make sure she felt cherished. For some reason, that was important to me, and I felt satisfied with how things went. From then on, when we were together, it felt like we were exploring a deeper connection every time and often. We drove along the coast, stopping whenever we liked, and spent the night in Eureka. The next day, we continued our journey to Portland and chose the downtown Marriott as our stop for the night. That evening, I shared gentle moments with Helen, taking my time and being caring. We explored Portland and its surroundings together. I had never spent time there before, and I had always wanted to. We tried different food trucks, explored shops, and walked around the waterfront. After a few days in Portland, we took an Alaska air flight to Anchorage and enjoyed some sightseeing for a couple more days before heading back to Portland. That evening at dinner, I put 2 things in front of Helen. The first was the letter she had left me when she decided to leave our marriage. Helen, please read this letter. When you're done, if you truly believe that the Helen from that day is gone forever, then I want you to walk to the fireplace over there and drop the letter in it. She read the letter slowly, then stood up and walked over. Before she set it down, she glanced back at me. When she returned, I continued talking. Helen, I am not the same Tom you left behind. I've changed in many ways. My interests are now broader. I have had many experiences, but what I know for sure is that I love you. I have always loved you and always will. If you feel the same, I want you to take my grandmother's ring and put it back on. She looked at the ring for a moment, tears filling her eyes. Without saying anything, she picked up the ring and slid it back onto her finger, next to her wedding ring that she had been wearing since our first meeting at the waterside apartment. She began to cry softly as I held her hand. The next morning, we got ready to return to Sonoma, stopping again in Eureka. It was late when we arrived, and I asked Helen if she wanted to stay or go back to her place. She decided to stay, and instead of going out, we grilled dinner. I hadn't told her about seeing Janet that afternoon, but it seemed that Janet had texted her about it. Tom, is it okay if I visit Janet for a while? We really need to talk, and I might be gone a while. I agreed, and she took a bottle of wine from the rack and left. I thought I'd spend the evening watching TV or a movie, but then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Kira Wilson. HRDUWRBCK. Come join us DNTN Joe's. I knew going to downtown Joe's could lead to trouble, but I left a note for Helen on the table where she could easily see it and informed her where to find my key. I didn't want to knock on Janet's door again. Once I got there, I spotted Kira. She was with Pam, Nigel, Millicent, a guy I didn't recognize, Mildred, and Marilyn. They quickly made room for me, and I joined them. I hadn't seen Kira in this kind of setting before. She looked relaxed and off work, dressed casually in a black mesh tank top and showing off her tattoo. Piercings in her eyebrows, nose, and lips added to her unique style, and a splash of purple hair on one side made her stand out. Even with the changes, I still saw the beauty I remembered from Heidelberg. Mildred came over, greeted me warmly, and then sat down between Nigel and me. "Where's the new guy?" I asked. "It didn't work out," she replied. I chose not to press her for more details. I figured she would share when she was ready. Instead, Marilyn spoke up. "Tom, do you know where Janet and Helen are? I didn't want to go into too much detail. Helen is at Janet's place tonight. I didn't want to interrupt them, but I texted her to let her know where we were." I noticed Marilyn typing away on her phone. A new round of beers arrived at the table, and we all lifted our glasses for a toast to good luck. Then Marilyn raised her glass again to celebrate Margot and Cynthia Hegland, the twins born to Pam and Nigel. That caught me by surprise. I knew one baby was on the way, but not two. We all cheered together. Before long, Helen and Janet joined us, and we moved a table to make room. Janet leaned in close and whispered to me, "We'll talk later. Don't drink too much." And then she gave me a gentle touch on my cheek. Helen flashed a big smile. I hoped they had walked instead of driving. Most people were staying at Janet's parents' house, while Mildred was at a nice inn called Four Sisters in Sonoma. As the night went on, everyone was enjoying themselves except for me, Kira, and Mildred. Helen leaned close and whispered in my ear, "Tom, when it's time to leave, Janet and I have something special planned for you." She gave me a playful wink. I glanced at Mildred, who wore a grin that hinted at mischief. When we finally left, I had Helen and Janet on my arms, and Helen pulled Mildred along too. It felt like a repeat of that night in Heidelberg a few months back. We stepped into my condo, and Helen playfully pushed me onto the couch, sitting close while the others watched with interest. "Tom," she said playfully, "you and I are a pair, and tonight is going to be fun if we all agree. Trust me, I'm all in." I didn't have much to say, so I simply nodded. Helen pointed to Janet and Mildred, and both stood on either side of me with Helen in the middle. Suddenly, music started playing, and the three of them began to dance joyfully, enjoying the moment together. Janet took Mildred's face in her hands and shared a sweet gesture of affection, while Mildred laughed. When we finished, I poured Helen a glass of wine, and I had a rum and coke. Welcome home, Helen. Epilogue. Our relationship is different now. It's been a couple of years since our unusual arrangement. I can't go back to how it was before. Helen and I haven't remarried, but she lives with me in my condo, which we plan to replace with a new house in the countryside. Janet has found someone special, but they are not exclusive yet. After a good discussion among the three of us, we've decided to stay close, good friends. I never asked about their wild night in Hedesbach. Some things are best left to our imaginations. Mildred is still a big part of our lives. She had my son 9 months after that night, naming him Thomas Will Davis. She sometimes shares our bed when Helen allows it, which is often. Thomas lives with Mildred, but when our new country house is finished, I plan to invite her to live with us in the main house or the cottage I'm building on the property. I've also set up a trust for Thomas, and despite her objections, I created a fund for Mildred so she will always be financially secure. Helen has fallen in love with Thomas and dotes on him, picking him up every time he cries. Following German tradition, Mildred wants him to call me Papa, and he will call Helen Nana. We hope this will clear up any confusion in the future. When he's older, we'll explain our unique family. Jason and Anne continue to grow their business and both have started new relationships. Anne and I talked about her mother's views on marriage and trust. I think seeing us together, even in our unusual way, has helped her regain some of her trust. She has met a nice young man whom I know is serious about her. Jason has met a wonderful young lady named Julie and told me he plans to propose soon, but he needs to speak with her parents first. I imagine David and Marilyn will have a long discussion with him about their hopes for their daughter. Omega is expanding, and with Bill retiring next year, the board has already chosen me as the next chairman along with my current CEO role. I might need to adjust Mildred's work situation then, but I'll handle that when it comes. Margaret is doing well in Heidelberg, and Ingrid has settled down and married an auto mechanic. Softtech continues to grow and move into new markets, and the kids are learning how to navigate the competitive world of business. Does this prepare them for challenges in their personal lives? I believe it does. This doesn't mean that Anne would never be unfaithful to her future husband, or that Julie might not be drawn to someone else if she and Jason ever got together. It simply means they could be more aware of outside influences on their relationships, and if I have helped them with that, then I feel content. So, am I still the loyal Tom I used to be before life got hectic and careless in our marriage? Honestly, no. But I still believe that if I had taken better care of my marriage and communicated more openly with Helen, we might still find joy in our time together, and that wouldn't have been so bad at all. Hey, audience! If you like this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.